I have to start again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of Occult Feminism, the Secret History of Women's Liberation. My special guest, Rachel Wilson, is here with me, and we are going to get into the second half of her great book on feminism. And I got so much interesting feedback from a couple things I said in the last show. One was about voting and how it was such a struggle to earn the right to vote, and how can I throw it away, and I don't want to participate in this democracy. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to.
How dare you?
Well, I mean, think about how many times have you voted for somebody and you felt betrayed when they like every time, maybe?
Every time?
Yeah.
Can't think of a time that I haven't, really.
Right. And so you vote and it goes one way or the other. And then, so the people that won, their person did not end up fulfilling any of the promises that they promised. And they just feel kind of stupid, like, oh, why did I vote for him? And then the other people are like, well, I told you so. Yep. So, and then another thing was like, how would you know if that person's son was a crackhead, for example? Like, now we there's just so many variables when it comes to choosing leadership like that. And I think, like, maybe at the local level it would make a lot more sense, electing your sheriffs, or your governor or your mayor, or things like that. But when it comes to federal elections, I just think that you could never know to give one person that much power is kind of crazy to me. So
and that doesn't even take into consideration the corruption of the system in general, and how it doesn't really ever work the way that it's supposed to work and all of that. But you're right, it's it's hard enough to pick a spouse. Like, how am I supposed to know if a person I've never met, based on marketing and speeches and political connections and money and all that stuff, if they're going to do what's good for me and my family? And
and another thing was, like, when you listen to people's reasons why they voted for somebody, they're really terrible. Like, this one girl was on a radio show, I'm not going to say her name because it's embarrassing, but she's like, I voted for Biden because he quoted the play Hamilton.
Excellent.
And it was like,
wow.
I think Hamilton was quoting one of the founding fathers, but you think that Joe Biden was quoting Hamilton, and that's what swung your vote to the other side. You know what I mean?
The same musicals I like.
And there's so much space for manipulation when it's just a two-party system like that, red team or blue team. And I was listening to another podcast, I'm not going to say his name either, but he goes, I always vote Democrat because they like to F-U-C-K. They're more liberal, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's your reason. Okay, democracy wins.
Right.
But this is one of the tricks that feminism has sold us, pack of lies, that everything would be better if we all just were independent and taking care of ourselves and speak for ourselves and vote the way that we want to vote. And last time we left off, we were talking about all of the famous feminist icons.
Yeah.
And how they were, carnival grifters, God haters, communists.
Yes.
What else? Theosophists?
Theosophists, tons of theosophists, spiritualists, literal, actual, Luciferians.
Mm-hmm.
Who believed that Lucifer was the good guy. You guys don't have to take my word for that. That's not something I invented, something I came up with on my own. In fact, there's a professor in Sweden who, this is his area of specialty. He wrote his PhD thesis on it, which is now a book that you can buy. He is an occultist, but I mean, that aside, he does some really solid work on really proving that Lucifer was the symbol of women's liberation in the 19th century. that was his PhD thesis, and it's really well done and really well researched. His name is Per Faxneld. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know how to pronounce Swedish things.
Okay.
I do reference him in the book. He's in the end notes there.
It says his book was Satanic Feminism, Lucifer as the Liberator of Women in the 19th Century, Per Faxneld. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did some really in-depth research on that, and especially in America, but also in England, which is kind of what I stuck to in the book, because, you know, you don't want to try to cover such an incredibly broad area that you just get lost in space and the book starts wandering all over. So I kind of stuck to like the liberal West, because there was a different idea about feminism at the same time going on in like Bolshevik Russia in the East, which is the book I'm working on now. And in the West, it was a very like liberal, a little bit more, you could say, bourgeois type of feminism. It was more the wealthier ladies and like the political class who were the ones pushing this. And they didn't have, like, we touched on this a lot in the last episode we did, that they didn't have the same idea of Christianity that you might think they would, and how they wrote the women's Bible and stuff like that. And they really saw Lucifer as the good guy. It was a very kind of Gnostic idea of like Lucifer being the liberator and the light bringer, and like a Promethean myth kind of thing, where it's like, oh, he gave us knowledge and he's going to liberate us from the evil patriarchy, just like he did, you know, like he gave us fire, he gave us knowledge, or, you know, that kind of idea.
That reminds me of what we were talking about before, Inanna.
Yeah.
She actually is a Luciferian character because in the story, she steals, I think they're called Mays, M-E,
Yes,
like
yes.
the rules of civilization from the
Yeah.
gods, and she brings them down to Earth.
Yes, same thing. Yeah, it's like a lot of the ancient myths are like very similar, like a different cultural retelling of the same type of ideas that have been around forever, which is really like what I'm trying to get across in the book, is that this is not new. People think feminism is like a new thing. Now, there is one big difference, though. There's one big like dividing line in the history of feminism, which is the industrial and technological revolutions. So you might have noticed that it's really gotten crazy since the Industrial Revolution. And that's because prior to that, I think that technology gives women like the illusion that we're the same as men. It gives us this ability to think like, well, I can have my own job, I can have my own apartment, I can get my own income, I can have my own car. What do I need a man for? Whereas if you and I were here 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, well, we would probably think that we couldn't very well protect ourselves as women from like invading bands of marauders, or we might not be able to hunt or do a lot of the like heavy manual labor that men had to do before we had technology and industry. So since that happened, that's why now feminism is like the dominant ideology in the first world. It's hands down, if you're born in the last century, you've grown up in like a feminist ethos. It's the dominant worldview now. And the reason for that is because, yeah, technology lets women think, well, what do I need a man for? And I've said for a long time, if you look around when there's like a natural disaster or a serious emergency, nobody is a feminist. That's the one time that you will not, nobody in a burning building waits for the feminists to run in and rescue everyone, right? When there's hurricanes and there's giant floodwaters everywhere, you don't see like pictures in the media of brave feminists carrying women and children out of the floodwater. It's always men doing that. So
nobody's a feminist on a sinking ship. Right?
Exactly. That's right. So I think that it was really the industrial age that allowed this ideology to flourish so easily. And I think if we ever, not that I'm saying we should, or that I want that, because it would be a lot more brutal than people think, but if there was ever like a reset kind of event, like say the grid went down for any significant amount of time, I think you'd see things like feminism and transformerism, if you guys know what I mean, kind of disappear. I don't think that they would be what they are right now. I think technology really enables that kind of stuff because it gives us this illusion that we are all the same. We just have like different chromosomes, or we just have different bodily preferences of who we're attracted to and things like that. And that other than that, we're all the same, because we don't live dependent on like physical labor or like battles in war the way they used to be. Everything's like fought with drone technology and stuff like that now. So I think that's where the big dividing line was. But the Luciferian stuff in the 19th century, yeah, they saw Lucifer as the great liberator. And really a lot of people who were into that more liberal ideology, which included feminism, started to either turn Christianity into something else that fit this paradigm, or they just straight up went for the Luciferian stuff.
I'm thinking of people who think about the past and they romanticize certain things and they are ignorant of other things and they omit things. And to me, in my studies of actually reading books about the ancient world, women, there was a lot of abuse going on, and it was Christendom that was a defense against that. Yes. So a lot of witches will say that, you know, we get our power through witchcraft and these ancient ways, but ancient pagan ways was not kind to women at all. It was the 10 Commandments, it was the coming of Christ, it was the spread of Christendom and love and respect for women that comes through venerating Mary.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That put women back in a place of not divinity, but, you know, respect and
veneration.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I did a stream with David Patrick Harry on Mother's Day where we talked about that, about the Theotokos, and how it's not a coincidence that you see like the mainstream first world Western feminism coming out of Protestantism, like you and I talked about last week, these crazy Protestant sects, because I think it specifically has a lot to do with the fact that they just got rid of Mary. They like completely got rid of her. I can say the church that I grew up in, it was almost like a taboo thing to talk about her too much. Like you can mention her, but like don't get all excited about her. Don't
get
like
Catholic about it.
Right? Exactly. That's what it was like. It was like,
Yeah.
Don't be like that. Don't, you know, she's nothing special. She's just another person. You know, it was just very like, I don't want to say it was anti-Mary, but it was very much like, don't put her on any pedestal. Don't give her any special place in Christianity. She's just another character in the Bible, like any other person. And I think that, yeah, if you take that out of Christianity, it does throw everything off balance, because she's the mother of God. She had like a central role in undoing the curse of Genesis and, you know, bringing Christ into the world. And when the angel came to her, she consented. She said, let it be me, you know. And I think when you take all of that away, then you do lose a ton of respect and value for things like motherhood and like the real feminine role for women, which is so important and so honorable and so amazing. And it's like, if you take all that away, well, sure, women are going to feel like, well, what are we supposed to do? Are we just chopped liver? Are we just nothing? We're not important. Like we're just supposed to sit here and knit
they're
or
just
something.
Put in this subservient role where all you do is domestic labor. And you have no outlets for your creativity or your ambition or your independent whatever, you know.
Right.
So I think people see that in Protestant Christianity, that womanhood has been muted because they have no female saints,
right,
or icons.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I think there's as many female saints as male saints that have canonized.
And we have saints like Saint Olga of Kiev. I mean, she's kind of badass, you know what I mean? She was like incredible. My patron saint is Catherine of the Wheel, who was a great debater who defeated all of the like pagan debaters that were sent to like try to change and convert her mind. And she changed and converted them, even to the point that they were willing to go to their deaths, because she did such a great job of, you know, apologetics really is what she was doing. So it's like, there are roles for all of those things for us as women, without us having to do things like say, well, I want to be in charge of the home, and I want to be in charge of the nation, and I want to be the priest, I want to be in clergy. We have monasteries where it's all women, where a lot of the nuns get to do some traditional clergy stuff and things like that. But I think that there's really historical, traditional, appropriate ways that women can be strong and wonderful and amazing without having to step all over the toes of men and like prove that they can do it too. And it's like the rivalry that's,
let them do something. Like, we do almost everything else around the church.
yeah,
The coffee hour, the decorations, the cleaning, all of these things that have to get done. Let the men have something to do, because otherwise women, I think, will take over just because the men will get out of the way and let them.
Right.
Because we're used to, I hate to say this, how do I put this? Like, a lot of men just sit around and just sit there and let themselves be catered to, and women are more than happy to just do it all, and then they get resentful because the guy's not doing anything.
Yeah, that's super common. Women talk to me a lot about this kind of thing for obvious reasons, and that's something that I hear a lot. And that's one of the reasons that this week I wanted to talk a little bit about the patriarchy and what it is and what it's not, because that word is just so abused. It's become this like boogeyman, awful word, like the patriarchy. If you say to a normal like 25, 30-year-old woman on the street, what's the patriarchy? Oh, it's bad men exploiting women, taking advantage of them so they can treat them like sex objects and slaves and keep them under control and make them do what they want. But what people forget about patriarchy, all it means is that, technically it means that things are done through the male lineage for the most part, like kings who would pass things down through sons and stuff like that. But when we're talking about it in the modern day, you could think of it more as men have like the stewardship role, the governing role, the stewardship role. And what everyone forgets, and this drives me nuts, is that comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. So my husband is a really good example. He's my favorite example. So I'm just going to use him. He's got 5 kids and a wife. That's a tremendous responsibility, financially, morally. I mean, we have 4 daughters. That's a lot of pressure.
That's a very masculine trait, to take on responsibility. Like, testosterone says, I can. If you've ever watched a guy see someone else do something impressive, they're like, I can do that.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's that testosterone that we need. Like, yes, you can do this. You can.
And thank goodness we would not have this modern world. Like I say this in debates all the time. What do you think men built all this for? They built it mostly for women, to impress women, to get wives, it's like when things are going well between men and women, they push and elevate each other to be their best versions of themselves. So like, if I'm doing really well in the things I'm supposed to do, Andy kind of feels like, well, gee, I don't want to slack off because look at all the stuff she's doing. She's doing a great job and I want to be like worthy of that. So then he'll push himself to do a little bit better in everything that he's doing. And then I'll see that and go, wow, look at him putting in like 70 hours this week and like handling issues and problems when they come up. Like he's a great problem solver. If there's ever like emergencies or things like that, not only me, but like everyone around us goes to Andy because they trust his judgment. They respect him. They know they can trust him. He has integrity. Those are like truly masculine traits. And the patriarchy, when it's done well, is supposed to be like that. It's laying this huge responsibility at the feet of men. And in exchange, we kind of do all the things that they can't do because we're entrusting them with like the defense of the home and the family and the nation. That was one of the reasons that women cited for not wanting to get involved in politics and voting, because they said, why entrust us with the security of the nation? What do you want us to do? Fight in wars now? That was something that they were truly concerned about back then. At 100 years ago, they were saying, we don't want to get conscripted. We don't want to be entrusted with the defense of the nation because we can't defend a nation. Like, and we don't want to try to, because that would be really, like, they had the foresight to think, well, that's not something I can really do. Why entrust me with that?
Weren't they talking about a female draft, or did that happen? Or
Oh yeah, that's been being discussed for maybe the last 15 years. I remember that first seriously, like, I think somebody wrote up legislation for that right around the 2008 election, because I was watching that election pretty closely because of Barack Obama and all that kind of stuff. And Ron Paul was running. And so there was, I think it came up in one of the debates that somebody wanted to introduce legislation to have women in the draft because they wanted them in SEAL teams, and they wanted them in Green Berets, and they wanted them in all these like elite military fighting forces. And it's like, well, if you're going to do all that, it's just inevitable where it was headed. Like, well, we should probably have women in the draft too, because you want equality, right?
I'm thinking of, do you remember that Katy Perry video, Part of Me? Or it was one of those where she was joining the military, and the whole video was her at boot camp and getting stronger.
Like a GI Jane
This
kind of
is
thing.
a part of me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
After she went through her divorce with Russell Brand, and
Yes.
she was like super upset about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a whole article about that, their relationship. But so her answer to being burned by a guy was to join the military and become tough.
Yeah.
And but women in the military get R-worded a lot.
Way more than any other demographic.
Right.
There is a lot of like really sordid, abusive stuff that goes on in the military, especially now that it's co-ed. From everything that I've read, you didn't have that as much before when it was an all-male thing. So yeah, it's just the idea, like fundamentally, there are ideas we have as Americans that we just don't question that we really should. For instance, the fact that it would be better if every person voted. Well, why? Because I see people on a daily basis that I think to myself, not sure that them voting is actually going to make anything better. And I'm not trying to be mean, dude. I'm not trying to be rude.
That's what I was trying to say. Like, ask people why they voted. Well, I didn't want the other guy.
Yeah.
So if they give you someone who's more terrible than the other one, you vote for it. It's that South Park joke about like, it was like turd sandwich or something else. Like these are my choices.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And something I like to bring up too when I'm debating is the 1960 election, or was it yeah, I think it was, where it was the first televised presidential debates, and JFK won. And the reason women swung it by a landslide because he was tan and handsome.
Yeah.
And the other guy didn't look good on camera, right? So it's like stuff like that. This is another thing that really makes me question women voting, is that they've done tons of surveys, because women vote a lot now. Like the female vote is a big deal. And so there's tons of think tanks and polling companies doing everything they can to figure out how they can get a bigger chunk of women's votes. And the data they have is like pretty appalling. Like it's a little disappointing as a woman to read it, because it's things like women will not vote for bald men. Women will not vote for short men. Women will not vote for men who, aren't tan, or they look sweaty, or they look like it's very, very much based on or their teeth being white enough, that kind of thing. And then of course, the emotional swaying, right? The appeal to emotion. Not that you can't sway men with appeals to emotion, you can, but it works a lot better on women, to be perfectly honest. So it's like, that's when you really saw like all these TV ads where they would really try to tug on your heartstrings and stuff coming in. Whereas before that, like if you go back and look at like presidential campaigns from say the 20s and 30s, it was more like based on economics and business policy and foreign policy and stuff like that. You didn't see as much of this like, they want children and grandmas to die in the street type of stuff that we've like grown up with. We've grown up with all the TV ads and radio ads. Do you remember the Barack Obama radio ad for his reelection campaign where it was like this hip hop music and it was like, he's got your back? Oh my gosh,
Oh,
I
no.
will never forget that. It was so funny. It was just like the most pandering. It was just so insulting and pandering of an ad, but that's what they do now, right? They'll just pander to the lowest based emotional thing and go for that.
What was that slogan that he used that if you play it backwards, it says, "Thank you, Satan"? It was one of his, oh
I know,
man.
I remember hearing that, but
And
I
the
can't remember what it
kids
was
would
for.
sing it in choirs and everything around the country.
Well,
It'll
I do remember the little kids singing the
Yes,
song
we
where they were
can.
like, yeah, yes, we can. That's
Yeah.
right. And then they would go, Barack Hussein Obama. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
That was another super creepy one that some SJW teacher came up with and had all the kids sing. And
It's really creepy when the kids go hard for political things because it's down to like manipulation because they
Totally.
have no idea,
no,
right? They're just
No.
voting for the guy with the biggest smile or the one
Well,
that
like-
looks cool. Remember Bill Clinton would come out and play his stupid saxophone to
I
be
do.
being cool.
I do. I remember my parents got divorced in 89. So the 88 election, because my mom was like this, she's a literal like Marxist feminist, like hard left Democrat. And my dad was like a neocon Republican in the 80s, I guess you would say, and it was I think it was Bush Dukakis in 88. And they literally like were going to fight each other to the death over like, they were threatening to lock each other in the house so they couldn't cancel each other's vote. And it was just like, this.
Yeah.
So now one of my favorite things to do is collect like old posters from around the time of suffrage, because a lot of them were really funny. There's a few in my book and I've put a few on my Substack. And one of the things that people were worried about with the vote was that everyone was going to get divorced because the woman was going to want one candidate and the husband was going to want a different one. And it was going to sow discord and enmity in the home. And it really kind of does. I mean, you saw that with Trump, right? Mm-hmm. There were women who were like proud to go on social media and tell you that they either broke up with their boyfriend or divorced their husband because he was a Trump supporter, right? Things like that. So it's just like
the new law overturning.
Yeah.
It's breaking up a lot of people too.
Yeah.
Which that is so nefarious because I don't really think that's a W for the good guys because I think there's hidden things in there.
I think so too.
I think it's
I tweeted about it right off the bat. I was like, I know this is encouraging on the surface and it looks really good, but I mean, you obviously know. If you know if you know the trends over time, it's like, number one, why right now? They never do anything randomly. There's always timing. They always choose the time that they're going to do something that big. It's never just like, oh, we just randomly want to just take a look at this and overturn it. And yeah, I was like, I don't trust it. I feel like it's a Trojan horse kind of thing. Like they're going to give us this, but along with it's going to come something else, or who knows, but it's like, I just, and I know it's like you're a jaded conspiracy theorist, but no, I have 40 years of watching this happen in my own life where it's like, it's never what you think it is. And they always have something up their sleeve and there's always an agenda, right? So it's like, it's not something that you can't vote your way out of life's problems, right? You can't just like solve all the problems in the world by voting.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm a libertarian and I don't want any government or any of that either, but it's just that
if you dumb down people enough, then you can just make them vote however you want.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
and you can just propagandize them to death, which is, I mean, you and Jay talk all the time about that. And so do I. I mean, feminism is like, there's so much propaganda and women don't even know. And I get emails all the time where they're like, I didn't know I was like propagandized to think all this stuff. I thought it was coming from my own, I thought these were my opinions. And now that I've like seen this, I can't unsee it. And I see it everywhere that these are not like really my thoughts I came up with. they're things that have been beaten into my head my whole life, so they just seem obvious. Like you hear that kind of thing from people on a lot of different like social questions where it's like, well, yeah, obviously everybody thinks this. And most people don't question it because we're busy living our lives. And it's just like my poor grandma's 96 and she did all of the stabbies because she grew up in the Walter Cronkite era where it was like everybody trusted that stuff. She's like, well, the news said it was safe, so it has to be safe. They could it. And my dad even was like, well, wouldn't that be illegal? And I'm like,
I know. It's funny to see their like blocks that they put up, because one time I was talking to somebody and I was describing some things and he goes, I believe that could happen in Russia, but not here.
Oh yeah.
Why not?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Okay.
We're all about everything's honest over here. I know. And it's like, we have to be a little bit delicate with boomers because they were probably the most heavily propagandized generation. And they were in this weird little point in time where it was like they had TV and radio and music and pop culture, but they didn't have the internet yet. So they didn't really have any dissident voices. They didn't have Halleck's Shones, and they didn't have like all these other resources. They didn't have CIA.gov where they could literally go and read classified documents for themselves. So they, I think, got the worst of it because it was like they got all the propaganda with none of the counter propaganda, with none of the other stuff that you could potentially undo some of that or see through it with. So I feel bad for them. And I have made the mistake in the past of trying to like dump some of these truth bombs on boomers. And it, like, I'm not kidding, you can really mess them up like psychologically trying to do that. So I'm always like, you can't just take a hammer to like boomer programming.
I know.
You can like seriously
you have to deconstruct it slowly, and you can't just splooge it all on at once because like it'll hurt.
Yeah. And they'll kind of start freaking out. So
yeah.
This stuff is like very real. The propaganda aspect of the things that we're talking about with this social and cultural engineering, it's very real and people don't understand how intense it is. So like that's another thing I tried to get across in the book is just how much of this stuff that you think you know about feminism and what life was like, before women could vote and things like that. It's really not like that, but that's all you've ever heard your whole life. So you're like, well, of course it's true.
Well, they grew up thinking that like top men go to esteemed places and figure out important matters and it trickles down. I'm like, that's just not is what's happening.
No.
But so we were talking about the characters of feminism, and I was wondering if you'd heard of this lady who I found in another book about Karl Marx, and her name was Kate Millett. Have you ever heard of her?
I don't think so, but I love finding new crazy feminists. So
you'll
tell
have
me.
to look her up because she wrote a book called Sexual Politics in the 70s. So Kate was a Marxist feminist. She was friends with Yoko Ono.
Okay.
And this book, Sexual Politics, is like considered the Bible of women's liberation. And she is called the High Priestess and the Mao Zedong of the women's movement.
Wow, I don't know how I missed her, except that in the 70s, there was this massive explosion of like feminists, and I could have gone for like hundreds of years with how many of them there were. So I only picked a few that were pertinent, but she sounds fun.
Because, well, her whole thing was like the Cultural Revolution is destroying the nuclear family.
Okay.
And so she was trying to promote promiscuity, eroticism, prostitution, and HOMO-SEX. And her sister actually claims she was literally possessed. Like her sister disowned her, didn't want to have anything to do with her because she thought she was crazy. She did crazy spells and talked to little green men.
So was she into like, did she use any of the typical drugs, or was she into any of the witch covens or anything like that?
I think she does have connection. And I do want to talk about witches again because it's just so sad. Like feminism is part of this package that comes along with paganism, witchcraft, like magic, crystals, tarot cards. Just it's a neat little
A starter pack.
but
It's like
yeah,
it's like the starter pack memes.
exactly. And it's really lame when you get into it. I'm going to do shows about witchcraft, but girls, this is not the way, because witchcraft does not respect women. Paganism did not bring any liberation to women. All it did was teach them that they need to be worshipped in a sexual way. So if you worship the goddess, you go to the prostitute temple and you pay to have your blessing of her body.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
And another really awful thing that I've actually debated some leftists who want to bring this back. Like Andy and I did a team debate against a couple of people who had some really bizarre ideas. Like it was very common in ancient times with the goddess worship stuff to have like full moon orgy type of things, so that the father of whatever babies were produced couldn't necessarily be pinpointed. They didn't have, tests and whatnot back then. So it was like, we're gonna all just run a TRAIN, and that way we can raise it communally. Again, the communal raising of children, the starseed moon children that just belong to the village. Hillary Clinton said it takes a village. That was a big thing when she was like running, and that comes from somewhere, and that's where that comes from. And again, it's just like this. There's no nothing sacred about you other than that, right? And yeah, you're right. That's not like, I don't know about you, but that's not what I want. I don't want the whole town going to town on me every time there's a full moon.
No, and this is like the
doesn't
rights
sound fair to me.
When they're trying to strip you of rights about your body. I believe that.
Yeah.
Because in Brave New World, nobody had rights of their own reproduction. You had to acquiesce to anybody's advances, or you were like an outcast. Did you remember that part?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're a bigot if you don't sleep with me, and you can't say no. And then here's another thing. Feminism is funded by elites. It's not a grassroots women like supporting each other, getting together.
Hold on.
Are you okay?
I'm in that audio.
I can still hear you.
Issue really quick. Hold on one sec. Oh, no. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can't hear you. Darn it.
No.
Hold on. I'm so sorry. I pulled the darn thing out. Now I don't know what I did. Okay, now try talking.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Oh. We're unplugged now. So what else have we
I'm gonna have
got?
to text Andy because he's got like 30 different things and I don't know which thing I need to plug it into. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And we're back and plugged in, and I can hear you, you can hear me. And
yes,
we are talking about how feminism was funded by elites. Can you tell us about that? It's not grassroots women getting together and getting things done.
Yeah, it's always funny because like if you hear about feminism in school or you watch a documentary or you just hear like feminist professors talk about it, they just act like it was just this thing that just organically happened on its own, where women just kind of like looked around and went, oh my goodness, we're being oppressed. This is really unfair and we should like do something about it. And so they started making pamphlets and marching, and slowly people just joined along. That's not really what happened at all. Like most social movements, it was pushed and engineered and financed by certain elites. And the people at the time who pushed this were, some of them were the usual suspects that we all, like, if you're in this world, you kind of know about people like, Carnegie's, Rockefellers, those types of like big legacy families that had a lot of money. But Ava Vanderbilt Belmont she was like the main financier. There were a couple of other ones. I think the Hearst family was one. There was a couple others that donated a lot of money to feminist causes and to the suffrage cause, but Ava Vanderbilt Belmont she was like born kind of wealthy, married one of the Vanderbilts, got divorced, married another rich guy whose last name was Belmont. He died. So she ended up being like basically one of the richest women of the time. And she had tons of money and not a whole lot to do with it. So she owned tons of properties all over the place. So she would like let suffrage groups and women's movements use her big mansions and her office spaces, and she would rent them office spaces. She would use her money to bail suffragettes out of jail. She would use her money to create newspapers and media outlets that would print all the printed stuff and distribute it everywhere. She would literally, something that's still being done a lot today, basically you buy a journalist or two at some big papers and say, hey, I'll give you this huge donation, or I'll give you all this money if you put this or that paper, in your newspaper. So they even like gender studies professors at universities say probably none of this would have gotten done without her, or it would have had to wait a long time until someone else with that kind of money wanted to do this. So it was mostly pushed by her and these same, and she had like connections. All her husbands that had all this money had connections to like Rothschild bankers, other legacy families, old European money families. So it really was something that was pushed by this handful of really wealthy people. And like I said in the previous episode, there were far smaller numbers in the pro-suffrage and the women's rights groups. They were a smaller elite circle of these wealthier women, which is one of the problems that like a lot of the Bolshevik feminists hated it. They hated Western feminism because they were like, it's just for the elite. They want property ownership for themselves. They want to own businesses. They want to inherit wealth. They don't care about like actual women and the actual plight of women. They say they do, but it's mostly just that they want to be able to get divorced and inherit the money. And there was some truth to that.
It's almost like every disenfranchised group has another like group that preys on them by using the charity against them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like
yeah.
BLM.
Yes. It was very similar to that, where you have a handful of really wealthy people funding and financing all this, and the few at the top get some money out of it. But their people on the streets are the ones. So like the suffragettes who were out on the streets, they were the ones that were getting like, some of them did violent protests. They were like bombing places. They did like TERROR campaigns, and they would go to jail, and they would go on hunger strikes. And there was like somewhat of a brutal aspect like out on the mean streets with regard to this kind of protest stuff. But it was never like the people with all the money pushing it. They would like bail them out so they could cause more anarchy and more problems. But they, those people weren't getting their hands dirty or anything like that. It really was more of like, if you were a wealthy wife of a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt and you wanted to be able to divorce him and take more of your money and create art museums with it, or whatever thing that they were into. And a lot of them were really into some weird esoteric religious stuff that they wanted to like give to different religious organizations and things like that. So yeah, a lot of the Western feminists were very like bourgeois, elite, liberal types of feminists, whereas in the East, it was more the Bolsheviks, but it was the same type of exploitation, right? So it was the same thing. The Bolsheviks, like the people who were at the top making all the decisions, having all the power and getting all the money, even though they were supposed to be against like people with upper class educations and upbringings, it was always upper class people like, Trotsky and Lenin and Alexander Kollontai. They all came from noble families and noble backgrounds. They weren't peasants or anything, but they would do exactly what you said, which is be like, oh, we care about the workers, we care about the peasants. And there may have been some people in those organizations who truly did, but for the most part, it was a vehicle to gain a lot of power and have more control. So.
And you said only about like under 4% of women in Massachusetts wanted to vote in 1895. That's a very small number.
they didn't even have good turnout for that referendum. So that was like a statewide referendum to see if they were going to put it on the ballot. And I think they said like 400 people showed up to vote for that or something. It was a really small number. And then the people who voted for it were a much smaller number yet. So they didn't do very many of those. There were only a few that I could find because anytime they would hold a referendum, it wasn't very popular for the most part. So they didn't really want to do a lot of that.
Another character you were talking about was Mabel Collins.
Oh, yes.
And Blavatsky, and they published a magazine called Lucifer, and the writings were channeled. And this is another thing you'll see with these feminists and the spiritualists and Isis Unveiled and Urantia Book and all these goofy, like, tangent witchcraft avenues. It's all going to be like con men, rich people, and mentally ill people.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
So it was a lot. Everybody was doing a lot of automatic writing back then. And a lot of these, like even Alice Bailey and, Madame Blavatsky and Mabel Collins, a lot of these people would, of course, say that they were doing this via automatic writing, that they would either go into states of trance or spells or seances or other things like that to contact these ascended masters or spirit guides who would tell them what to write. Now, the gender studies professors and the feminist professors, their spin on that is, oh my gosh, they were so brilliant because they figured out that no one would listen to them if they were just regular women writing. So they came up with this as like a vehicle to get people's interest.
Right.
Because they were just so smart. They were just so clever. I think it's one of two things. Like you said, it's most likely that they were probably con men. They were conning people. This was a way to get money. And these people all made money. That's the other thing, is like they did make money off of this. They weren't doing it for free or out of the goodness of their hearts or anything. They were, again, being just like Marx was, they were being financed by wealthy people. Wealthy people would buy them homes or give them money to do this sort of thing. And then they would sell the books and sell the pamphlets, and they would get speaking fees and go on speaking tours. But they were doing all types of like esoteric magical things to produce these feminist writings. So it's either one of two things. Either they really were contacting spirits or they were full of crap. I don't think either one looks good for them, but I don't buy this idea that they were just so brilliant and so savvy and so just so clever that they figured this out as like a literary device. And one of the reasons I think that is because several of them were they had like very high ranking membership in things like the Golden Dawn, for example. So it's like, I think some of them truly did buy into it. And we have letters that these people would write back and forth to their friends or to their colleagues that do indicate that they truly believed in this stuff. Because you can't keep up the con at all times, right? You wouldn't tell your best friend in a letter that you don't think anyone's going to see that you've just figured out like some new level of esoteric magic that you think is going to help you. So
what's funny to me is when these characters have a falling out between each other and what they fall out over. And in your book, you were talking about how Blavatsky accused Collins of tantric black magic and being too slutty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And just, I did
get
some
very
good
feminist of
chuckles.
Right? She should be able to like slay.
Right? Slay queen.
Yeah.
Now, there were, especially like prior, I would say prior to the 90s. The 90s is kind of when the sexual liberation thing, like it became a little more taboo to speak out against it. Because like a lot of the like Camille Paglia and Christina Hoff Sommers and some of the like boomer feminists who are still around now, they've kind of gone against the latest waves of feminism because they don't like the OnlyFans stuff and the prostitution stuff and the sexual liberation stuff. They want to be taken like seriously as they want to be CEOs and academics.
Well, that's the biggest part of the scam is you've got women giving away their intimacy for nothing.
Yeah, for free, just for attention. It's literally just for attention. It's for like, in a way you could even say it's like for psychic energy. Like some of these women that do this stuff, it's like they want attention. They want, like when we talk about simp culture, where you get guys who will buy Belle Delphine's bathwater for like $20,000 or whatever,
Yeah.
that gives her like a tremendous sense of power. Like these people will grovel at my feet. You know what I mean? It's kind of a way to reach this level of power over people that most women throughout history didn't have. There might be a few like Cleopatra or Helen of Troy or somebody like that, but it's like a modern version of that, only all you need is a camera and an internet connection, and you can get this insane level of men who don't have anything, right? They don't usually have anything else in life. They're probably depressed, they're isolated, probably have terrible home lives and backgrounds, and they're willing to do whatever just to get a tiny bit of attention or acknowledgement from this woman behind the camera. And that's just a tremendous amount of power that's going to corrupt you. Like there's no woman who can just handle that and not have it corrupt her to like very bad levels.
Nobody who makes a killing selling pictures of their feet on the internet is going to respect men anymore.
No.
They know that their weaknesses and exploit that. So
well, and the flip side of that that's so depressing, this was another thing that I found when I was researching for debates. I do a lot of debates where I debate like feminist people or people who think that feminism is good, like even a lot of guys. And I did a bunch of research on OnlyFans, and the average woman who has an OnlyFans account, like a sexy one, is making like $80 a week. So imagine there's pictures of your bum out there forever and you get $80. Like, how is this empowering? How is this good? Like, my oldest daughter's 21 and she has talked at least 3 of her friends that I know of out of starting an OnlyFans.
Oh, good.
She's like, Mom, I'm starting to feel like this is my part-time job to like talk them out of it and explain like why it's a terrible idea and they shouldn't do it, you know? And
yeah,
she's just like, what are they thinking? I don't get, but it's like, you know, they're really short on money for some reason that month, or there's something they really want to buy that they don't have the money for, and they're young, they don't have a lot of income potential. None of her friends are like getting engaged and marrying a guy with a good job. You know, they're all just like moving in with their boyfriend. None of them have any money. And so it's very tempting because there's like this promise of you're going to make all this money, but the average woman's getting $80 to do this. Like that's very, like, it almost makes it more tragic in a way, because it's just like, for nothing. You're selling it for nothing.
Yeah.
And it's going to always be out there now.
You mentioned another character, Florence Farr.
Yes, she was one of my favorites.
And she was a girlfriend of Aleister Crowley. He always pops up. He's like my Kevin Bacon.
Everywhere. He is. Yeah.
6 degrees to Crowley or less than that, because he is one of these pivotal characters that just like influenced so much. So she was girlfriend of Crowley, George Bernard Shaw, and W.B. Yeats.
Yes.
She said that prostitution should be treated as sacred, and that's exactly what we've been pinpointing in Ishtar and Nana lore, and OnlyFans just makes it that much easier. And you said she was an occult priestess known for her ability to summon powerful demons. So this is another feminist icon, conjurer of witchcraft, right?
Yep. Exactly. And it's exactly the stuff that you know all about now from all of your study of like pop culture and Hollywood. She was an actress, but it was theater back then, right? We're talking 100 years ago, so, or a little over that. She was like late 1800s, early 1900s, I believe. And so she was a very popular actress in that really influential like British theater in London in the Victorian era. And like you said, W.B. Yeats, she had all the famous playwrights of that time. Like she was their muse. They were super into her. All these guys like wanted to be with her. And she got into the occult, and became super popular and very powerful because all these, basically all the guys who were into the occult wanted to be her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up with her own like order in the Golden Dawn, I believe, that she was like high priestess of. And but her life was really tragic. And another thing that all these women have in common, their life is very tragic, very depressing, and they usually meet a horrible end. And she did too. Like, she died of awful cancer, and she was alone and never had any kids. There's another theme in most of these women in the book. They'll have a husband and children who they will abandon for this stuff. It happens over and over and over.
You said that about Margaret Sanger. So
yeah.
1920s came the 19th Amendment, and that ushered in the roaring 20s, right?
Yeah.
And the flappers and a first wave of sexual liberation. And then you had some kind of birth control back then.
Yeah, diaphragms were the first thing.
Okay. And then this links up with eugenics, secular scientism, and transhumanists. And you make such a good transition in this book to just show you how this like progression goes from liberation, birth control, eugenics to transhumanist.
Yeah. Right? So fast. It's like the slippery slope is so real, and it's just like a wild, fast ride straight down.
Yeah,
into
it's that stripper pole to hell, man, where you're getting the devil the lap dance. Like, no.
It's exactly what it is. It's nuts. Like, when I've told this before, but when I started this book, I thought it was going to be mainly about like the funding and the politics of it, and how like things haven't worked out so well, like with the family and depression rates and all these things that we're dealing with now. I didn't know how absolutely insane it was going to be. Like, I've been doing conspiracy theory history stuff since I was in like junior high. When I was in junior high, one of the first books my mom let me check out on my own when I got to pick my own from the library was, I loved old movies because I grew up a lot with my grandmas, and I loved all the old movie stars. So I'd find any books on like Elizabeth Taylor or Marilyn Monroe. And I read one about Marilyn Monroe, and I thought, wait a minute, she just mysteriously died, and this JFK stuff was going on over here, and all these other people. I was just like, I was like in 6th grade thinking I'm going to solve the mystery of like what really happened to her. So I've been into that kind of stuff for a long time. But this was shocking even to me, of like the Sanger chapter actually was like emotionally hard on me to write. When I really got into her life, it was like,
real fast, this is the lady who created PLANNED, Parenthood, which has got in trouble many times for selling fetuses
and parts,
profit. And then there was a crazy hospital in the UK that was using bodies for energy.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yes. There's been numerous exposés that have been done where they've caught these places doing that, randomly storing like bodies, tissues, and parts for different things, selling those things, covering the Kermit Gosnell stuff from a few years back. It's been terrible, but it's hasn't, that's like not new either. That stuff was going on back in the day too. And in that chapter, I talk about how much they lied to get this stuff passed, to get, I mean, everybody kind of knows now that Roe v. Wade was like kind of a scam. Like, her whole story, Roe's story, was made up. The lawyers fabricated it, these 2 women lawyers. But same thing with getting Planned Parenthood clinics established and getting birth control established. It was the usual suspects, Rockefeller funding, institutes over in Europe with NAZI doctors who were studying eugenics and things like that, and they helped Sanger and the Rockefeller Foundation develop the pill and get it legalized and widely distributed. And they said, so at the time, and this is another really common tactic, they said, we have to have ABORTION clinics because it's going to be a temporary stopgap measure, right? Someday in the future, everyone will have birth control. We'll have the most technologically advanced, amazing birth control, and family planning will be the easiest thing ever. It'll just be like planning your breakfast. So there won't be any more unwanted babies. But we're not there yet. So temporarily, we have to have these clinics. And Sanger wrote a book. She put together a book that she said was compiled of a couple hundred letters from women all around the country that she had received with horror stories about having a bajillion children, right? Like, I'm 22 years old and I'm on my 15th baby and we're all starving and we're not going to make it through the winter. Please, can you get us some birth control because I just don't know what else to do.
Do you remember that sculpture? It's in like the Netherlands or something. It's that guy who's like being beaten down by babies. He's got like babies.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's some like pro family planning sculpture, but I'll send it to you. It's really funny. It's a meme. Like he's just fighting off babies like that. It's really funny.
So ridiculous. But yeah, she compiled it, and this book was like a major propaganda piece that at the time was really popular, and they would send it to like senators, to doctors. They would send it to like strategically send it to people that they wanted to influence. And I looked into this book because I read it. You can find this in like the Internet Archives and read the whole thing.
Mhm.
And as you're reading these letters, number one, they all sound the same. You know what I mean? It's like very, very similar in the style of writing. It sounds basically to me like the same person writing the same story 200 times, just with slightly different details. And I was like, that's odd.
Yeah.
But if these were letters, surely we have some of them, right? So there's a whole project to preserve everything we have on Margaret Sanger, because the leftists at universities think that she is literally a goddess. They think that she is like a savior of humanity. So they have a thing called the Margaret Sanger Papers Project, which archives anything and everything that she's ever touched. They've probably got like her tea napkin that has her lipstick on it or something. They preserve everything. And her children and her grandchildren have helped with this effort because they get a lot of money off her name. Her son, I think, one of her sons, and then grandson have run Planned Parenthood.
Mhm.
Since her death. So they have continued to trade off of her brand and her name and her legacy. So they save everything this woman ever had. Do you know how many letters of the, so she said this was just a couple hundred letters of the 20, I think she said 20,000 letters she got from women. It was some astronomically huge number. Do you know how
Mhm.
many they still have?
Not 20,000, I'm sure.
2.
Oh,
They
I'm
have
sure
2.
they got lost with Hunter Biden's laptop, probably.
They did. They literally said, well, a lot of them were just lost to time. And she sent a lot of the letters to different doctors at different clinics when they felt bad about doing these ablishments. So she would send them the letters. And so they're probably just lost to time. And I'm like, you have her grocery receipts from when she was 5 years old, but you don't have but 2 of these like tens of thousands of letters. So
Right.
I'm 99%, like my personal opinion, I can't 100% prove it, but I think that whole book was a giant propaganda piece and a lie. And it came out later that much of what that organization did to get their clinics open was lies. There were people who were former employees, former doctors, former bureaucrats at these places who came out later in the 50s and 60s and said that it was all lies and baloney, and it was lots of forgeries and lots of spinning, and same with the whole back alley
Con man
abortion
forging things? What are you talking
thing.
about?
So much.
What?
I would come down all the time when I was researching this, and I'd come marching down the stairs and I'd be like, Andy, you're not going to believe this thing I found. And he'd be like, what is wrong with these people? He was just like, it's just all like lies and fraud and baloney. And I was like, yeah,
Well,
basically.
like you said, it's a spiritual battle. So here's
Yeah.
the sculpture. And you've never seen that one? It's a
No.
it's a like a family planning meme. Like he's just burdened by all these babies that he has sired.
Does he not have pants on?
No.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
that was what I was seeing, but just
And
wanted to
so,
confirm.
Norwegian, a commentary on too many babies. That's funny.
I don't know what's going on there, but
So yeah, Margaret Sanger, she was a neglectful mother, so much so that her daughter died in
yeah.
her absence, where if she had been there, the other children say that it probably wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah, she would just leave for like years at a time because She would do stuff that was illegal. They'd have warrants out for her arrest. She'd flee to Europe. And while she was in Europe, she was sleeping with everybody too. They're like H.G. Wells, all these same intellectuals. They're all always sleeping together. That's the other thing. They're all always sleeping around in the same circles. I'm like, these people they really work together. You know what I'm saying?
These people are for the streets, and like we are venerating them as some kind of social icons. H.G. Wells, yeah, of course, he's like a mega villainous character in this household. Jay's done so many shows about his works and his globalist book series. And H.G. Wells called Margaret Sanger the greatest woman in the world.
Cringe.
Right. And so it's funny.
I'm embarrassed on his behalf that he would say such a thing.
Their answer to helping humanity, because they're always looking from their ivory tower over the unwashed masses, right? Saying, oh, what can I do to fix this? Like some kind of saint. And their answer to helping the poor is always making sure they're never born.
Yes, always, every time.
Right?
It's always depopulation. It's always they shouldn't be born.
Yeah.
It's always don't exist.
That's
I will help you. I used to have this saying back in my I went through a cringe libertarian phase in my late 20s, like most of us do. And I used to always say, anytime you hear the government say that they want to, or the elites, that they want to help you, just exchange the word help, take the word help out and put in the word KILL, and then you'll know what they actually have planned. Because it always, historically, you can just look back and it's always that. So yeah, they wanted to do that as well. And Sanger is famously quoted as saying, the most merciful thing a large family can do for one of its members is kill it.
Dang.
That's one of her most favorite, famous quotes.
Do you remember when Paris Hilton came out with the t-shirt and it said, stop being poor?
Yes, I do.
I just think of Margaret Sanger. She would have a t-shirt like stop being born or something.
Yeah, she would. Well, I mean, Gloria Steinem had that. Remember the shout your abortion shirts?
Yeah.
And Steinem had one of those shirts. And
so Sanger, like you mentioned before, she was besties with J.D. Rockefeller, who's on the villains list, right?
Yep.
And then the people involved in creating the birth control pill were pathological creeps and weirdos, right? Literally. One had to be strapped down to keep from touching himself at night. It's a guy called Stanley McCormick.
Oh, yes. You got to if you haven't done a little deep dive on Stanley McCormick. Well, the book kind of tells you, but yeah, he was another ultra wealthy family.
McCormick's? Like the spices?
No, I thought so at first too, but they were involved in agriculture and tractor building and things like that. I think that whatever business they had eventually became maybe one of those big International Harvester or Caterpillar, some company like that, that was really huge back then. So they were one of the wealthiest families in America. And yes, he was total crazy nut job. He was obsessed with monkeys. Again, another weird thing that pops up a lot. They're always monkeys or dolphins or something.
Yeah.
That these people will become obsessed with. And he used to had to put him in a straitjacket so he wouldn't do inappropriate things with himself or his monkeys. He was married, but his wife, the psychiatrist, told her not to be around him. So she was trying to find help to cure him allegedly, and ended up going to the same NAZI doctors at the same institute in Germany that Sanger went to get the birth control. I'm these people always, it's so weird because they always just end up knowing each other, being connected, being friends,
sleeping together.
Sleeping together,
being on each other, with each other.
And it was or one would divorce this wealthy guy and then get with his best friend who was another wealthy elite guy, and they would all just be wife swapping. And these people are very crazy and depraved.
Gen Z is really impressing me in some ways. Waking up, one of the things they're eschewing now is birth control pills. They're realizing how terrible this is for your body.
Oh, I know.
And I don't know, do you have maybe 30 more minutes to talk?
Yeah,
okay.
I do today.
I've been on birth control pills because I went to a doctor and I was 20 years old super innocent, thinking doctors help you,
Of course.
adults know what they're talking about.
Trust the experts.
This has been tested by the FDA. I'm sure it's fine. And I complained to my doctor. I said, I have painful periods. And he's like, well, we'll just put you on birth control. Like they always do that. That's their answer to literally every female
It's like
problem.
their favorite thing to prescribe, like it's candy.
Yeah. Like it's candy, exactly. And so he puts me on these, and I'm a good goody two shoes church girl. Like I'm not married yet. There's no like pregnancy issues or anything. It's like was strictly for like medical reasons or whatever. So this changed my entire personality almost. I did not like to be touched. I did not like to be hugged. I was very like robotic in my emotions. And then I told him that it's not working. And he's like, well, just skip the placebo, take all of the hormones back to back, and you'll never have a period. And I'm just like 20 years old, right? I don't know what to do. So I start doing that. And I stopped having periods per the doctor's orders. And then he was like, well, there's an easier way. If the pills make you queasy, I can give you this shot that will like turn it off for a year at a time. And I was like, okay, I guess that sounds good. If I don't have to have one for a year, that sounds like a vacation from menstruation, right? So I get this thing. And here comes the menopause, hot flashes, all kinds of other side effects. And then he's like, well, let's do a biopsy of your cervix and take out 4 chunks of it and send it to the lab. And so I'm going through all of these medical procedures and my body is getting whacked out, right?
Yeah.
And they don't give you any pain meds or anything when they do these procedures to take biopsies and like, oh, look, just come in and we'll snip another piece off of your uterus without any pain meds. And so I go through this whole thing and come to find out this doctor goes to jail for molesting 12 women.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm just like looking at my history with him and things are starting to add up. And I'm like, this is probably a creeper who is trying to sterilize me. And so I just stopped taking all of it at once and try and let everything like reset. But I've always had problems like cysts. I've had surgeries for cysts. I've had endometriosis. Like ever since the doctors got their meat hooks in me, it's never been the same. And I've never been pregnant, and I don't know like if I could be or not, or it's not going to happen, or if it's never the right time. So that's another thing. Like a lot of girls who are growing up right now are going to have this infertility issue. Because of the stabbies.
So, and all the things you just talked about are so common. And they give girls, especially like very young girls. When I was 16 years old, they were just trying to like give me birth control I went to get like a Hep B test or something for my first like Burger King job or something silly. I had to have like the little test or whatever. And they were like, we can give you free birth control and condoms. And I was like, no, thanks. Like, I'm good. And they were like, really? Because we can just give you a pregnancy test and an exam, and then we can give it to you for free. And they were just like, it was almost like they were pushing it. And I was thinking, why do you all want to give me this for free so bad? Like, what? And it's not really informed consent, because they'll just basically say like, oh, this is very safe. Everyone's on it. It's super well studied and it's very well tolerated. And they just put everybody on birth control. I think I have a stat in my little stack of stats for debates that 88% of American women will at some point be on hormonal birth control in their lives. That's a lot.
I know. It's not fair. There's so many side effects they don't tell you about. Especially, I've seen girls who are like beautiful and fit and thin and normal size, and then they get the one in your arm and just blow up. And I'm like, and they think they need to diet and exercise, and then they start the eating disorders and the self-harm and everything. I'm like, girl, just get that crap out of you. Like,
it's so true. Well, birth control made me insane. I tried it a couple of times, and it would either give me terrible migraines, and they put me on like every different kind, because I wouldn't do this now, obviously, but when I was younger, I was like, I want to like slow down having babies. Now, of course, I wish I could go back and like just keep going. But at the time, I was being pressured from everyone around me, like, why are you having so many kids? Why are you having so many kids? You're going to be poor. They're going to grow up poor, and you're going to be poor, and everything's going to be terrible. And people just like try to doomer you so bad about having children.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, by the time I had two, everyone around me was going, well, you're going to stop now, right? You're going to stop now, right? You're not going to have more, are you? That would be weird. Why are you having more? And it was just like, I really loved having kids, and I wanted to have more. Me and Andy both always say we wish we would have had like two more, which people think is nuts because we had five. But at the time, I'm like kind of caving to some of this pressure too, and going, well, maybe I should, yeah, I guess, and all right. And so I would take pills, and I remember like sobbing at a coffee commercial. It was like a Folgers commercial where the kid comes home for Christmas or something. And I'm just like bawling, and it would just make me crazy. I'm like a very like level-headed person for the most part, especially like for a woman, I guess. And it would just make me like an emotional basket case. And I would get like weird anxiety. I would get terrible migraines. And it was just awful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do not recommend. I know that there are some people who do use it and like it, and that's fine. I'm just saying they really overprescribe it, and they really undereducate people on the potential risks,
Mm-hmm.
the side effects, how it can affect your future fertility, all the things that you just mentioned. I totally agree with.
I just wish I had never met that guy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
This has been a lifelong thing to try and repair what happened.
Awful.
Like something happened to me, it was like that traumatic of a thing. And so like another thing is overpopulation is a myth for one. And this is really bigoted of people to act like if you're born poor, you're not worthy of life if you're not going to have money, right? That's not very woke ideology to not allow people to exist just because they don't have as much money as you think they should have. I know lots of poor people that love life.
Yeah.
They're rich.
Well, Andy grew up in like abject poverty. He was one of 7 kids. So there was 9 people, and they lived in like a tiny 1-bedroom cabin for like half of his childhood, where he would like sleep in a closet or on the couch. But he was like, I didn't know anything was wrong. I was like perfectly happy. Like if we had food to eat and I had like a place to sleep, I was just a little kid playing outside, and like I was happy. And now he's got kids that wouldn't exist if his mother had like thought that he should be terminated because he was going to be poor. Like poverty is a temporary situation, especially in America. Like that doesn't last. There were periods where I was like really destitute too with all my kids when I was young, and I'm pretty sure they're all glad that they're here.
Having a family that's privileged with money does not necessarily mean you're going to be happy. Like look at Bill Gates's kids. They look miserable. Elon Musk kids hate him. They look miserable. Like,
yeah. Well, and like the people that we were just talking about, like Stanley McCormick and these like wealthy families, they weren't happy. They all had like really tragic, awful lives with all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So yeah, it is a really horrible thing to think that unless everything's gonna go well for you, and that's so silly too. You can't guarantee that. Like why do you think that because you have money, like this is what we tell women, right? We're like, you have to go to college, get in $60,000 of debt on average. That's the average, like, or no, I think it's 32 now. $32,000 is the average amount of debt held by women in the United States. Women now hold 65% of all college debt in the United States. We tell them, go to college, get a degree, get in debt first, then start a career, and you have to get your career established and get to the point where you're making good money. Then you can start thinking about getting a husband. And after that, you can start thinking about having kids. Well, for most women, that's all going to be like, she's going to be 35 just starting to look for a husband. And that doesn't work. But they look at people.
That's another scam. They suck you into student loans, taxes, jobs, voting, all of it. I don't want anything to do with that.
No, and it really is. It because it like locks you into being a cog in the wheel. You are obligated to your debt and to your company and to like, well, I had a woman write me a letter. I sound so old. I had her write me an email where she was like, I just got your book and I don't know what to do. I'm in college. I'm almost done with like my dentistry education. And she's like, I just became Christian a year ago, and all I want in my life is to get married and have kids. Like, that is this burning desire I have. It's the only thing I think about. It's the only thing I want to do. I tried to sit down with my parents and tell them that I don't want to be a dentist. I want to get married and have kids. And they like flipped out and they were like, you've already got like how many years, 6 or 8 years, all this money that we've put in for your schooling. You're just going to give this all up for some silly pipe dream of having a family. What if you get divorced? What if he leaves you? They fill her head with all these like scary scenarios of what could happen and that she needs to be a dentist first. And she's like, if I establish a practice, it's going to take like 10 years. And then once I have an established practice, why would I leave? And she just like felt so trapped and didn't know what to do. And that is the norm now for women. We push them into this and tell them that if they don't do these things, they're a loser, they're lazy, they're not smart enough, they can't hack it in the real world, you're going to be vulnerable, right? Like they scare women and say, if you don't have your own money, then you'll be trapped in an abusive marriage and you won't be able to get out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, we don't ever do that to career women. We never say to career women, well, what if you go through all this time and money to become a psychologist and the field is like totally oversaturated and you can't get a good paying job? What are you going to do then? Well, what if you decide to be a musician and you break your hand? Then what are you going to do? Like, we don't scare the bejesus out of career women with all the things that could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We only do that to women who say that they want to have families. And I think that's super unfair. It's illogical. It's not rational. And it's very silly. And so I think most women are like pushed into this more than like, I don't think they really just want to be Hillary Clinton when they grow up. You know what I mean?
No. I think women are more romantic than that. But going back to the occult real fast, and then we'll come back to what you're talking about. Marjorie Cameron is another feminist icon. And if you haven't heard of her, she was the girlfriend of Jack Parsons, the occult rocketeer.
Yeah, I gave Jay a shout out in the book because I was just finishing it up when I heard his episode he did on her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, she has to go in the book. Like, she has to. She's like a total avatar of the new woman.
Yeah.
You know, which is exactly what she was intended to be. That's what Parsons wanted her to be.
Yeah.
Was the Scarlet Woman.
Scarlet Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one, Simone de Beauvoir.
De Beauvoir.
De Beauvoir was a pansexual, one of the first people to say, I am pansexual. Mm-hmm. Right?
She was awful. She's another horror show. She was I terrible at pronouncing French things with my Midwestern accent, but the philosopher Sartre, I guess it would be, was her boyfriend.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Jean-Paul Sartre. Like I said, terrible pronunciation. I apologize. But they were like life partners. Neither one of them wanted to get married. They didn't believe in that. They didn't want to have kids. They didn't believe in that either. And they got into a lot of trouble because they were both teachers. They were both philosophers and writers, and they were both teachers. And she seduced several teenage female students into doing stuff with her and him, to the point that there were criminal charges brought against them in France. I mean, in France, come on. And they were both petitioning to have the age of consent lowered or done away with altogether. So yeah, they were creepers. And she's the one that I have one of my most favorite famous quotes from feminists is, she had an interview in the 70s with Betty Friedan where she said, I'm just kind of paraphrasing because it's a long quote, but she was like, no woman should be given the choice just to stay home and raise children, because if they are given that choice, too many of them will choose that. So we have to like kind of force them out of the home.
Did we forget to mention that Margaret Sanger tried to contact her dead daughter through sex magic and Rosicrucian rituals?
We did forget to mention that. And that is one of the things I found that I never hear. Like that's you hear a lot about the eugenics aspect of her as far as criticisms go. But no, she was dabbling in that. One of her lovers was Havelock Ellis, who was another creeper. A lot of creepers. And yeah, she dabbled in that because she left. So she had the 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And when she was off gallivanting around the world doing her sexcapades and her feminist stuff, she would leave them in boarding schools. And so she dropped the boys at a certain boarding school, but for some reason she left the girl with this weird bohemian hippie commune people. And the daughter got very sick and died while she was overseas. And the one brother always blamed her, and said that wouldn't have happened if he would have ever been here, because he was writing her letters saying our sister is really sick, like something is wrong, you need to come home. And she wouldn't come home because she was afraid of, well, number one, she was with all her boyfriends, which she was super into. And then the other reason is there was warrants out for her arrest here in the United States. So she didn't want to come back. And her daughter died in these people's care. And she did have some guilt over it. But yeah, the way everybody always likes to say that these people are atheists. And I don't really believe that there's real atheists, because most of them end up doing this kind of stuff, or they believe in something. They make a god of something. And she dabbled in some black magic rituals and Rosicrucian stuff, trying to like contact the spirit of the daughter and things like that. And it's funny because I read this in like a very old biography of her, but it's a really good, really detailed, really well sourced biography of her. And it's just kind of mentioned in passing, like it's no big deal. And I'm like, they always do that. They'll be like, oh yeah, and they also did black magic.
By the way, she was sex magic ritual. Yeah. That's what Marjorie Cameron made me think of. And then it's crazy because like the longer you live, the more you realize that promiscuous people are very damaged.
Yes.
And desperate and narcissistic. They're not liberated.
No.
They're not cool. They're not sexy. They're not attractive. They're not free spirits. They have weak boundaries.
Yep.
They are predatory. They're narcissistic. I mean, they're just down bad. Like being promiscuous is a character deficiency that you need better self-esteem.
Yeah.
For men and women.
Yeah.
Both.
I agree 100%.
Right? So it's just, I love how you did all of these like character backgrounds, because you get this panel of weirdos.
Yeah.
That have created this ideology that so many people, women especially, buy into. And it's so important to look at who these people actually were, like Karl Marx. Like you can talk all day about communism, but you have to know like the source of this is a mentally unstable person.
Yes, exactly. Right? It's so true. That was my whole thing, was like, look at where this comes from. Look at the people who lived this ideology, believed in it, and why did they want everyone else to do this too? That's the other thing, right? They had these, like I said, they all had pretty miserable, crazy lives. They all met pretty bad ends for the most part. A lot of like suicides and, awful deaths and things like that. And they had like really tragic lives, but they were like hell bent on making this everyone's life. They wanted the whole world to be doing these things and living this way. And it's like, read about these people and then tell me if this is still what you want. Tell me if this is still something you think is like a good idea that we need to make sure everybody does.
It's almost like looking at a piece of fruit that you're being offered, and then you want to look at the tree that it came from. If the tree is gnarly and diseased and like infested with bugs and dying and disgusting, are you going to want to eat this fruit? I don't think so. Gloria Steinem was another one. And she's probably one of the most recent famous feminists, right?
Yes.
And her work in media was directed and funded by the CIA directly.
Yeah, it
right?
sure was.
To liberalize Western culture.
Yep. She was part of the Congress for Cultural Freedom. She had direct CIA funding to start Ms. Magazine. And
that's one with Colley on it from last time, right?
Yes. Yep. That's the one. And she was, I wrote a little bit about her and Betty Friedan because they had a bit of a rivalry. And to me, it's like super obvious why. Gloria Steinem was like pretty hot for back in the day. She was a very good looking, like easily marketable person. You can see why they picked her. And another thing you might have noticed through the book is that in the 20th century, like from the 40s on, these women were kind of recruited out of the same universities that we see this with like different world leaders with, you know, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, those kind of places. They did the same thing with the feminists, but it was like Smith College or, what's the other big women's college? Vassar College, some of these prestigious women's universities. And they would, it was very easy to find women who would buy into these ideologies and promote them there. And they would find, you know, ones that were good for marketing purposes and put them out front. You know, it's another thing that's never grassroots. It's always very engineered as who they prop up and put out there.
Just like Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Do you remember that story?
Yes. Yeah.
So that wasn't even real.
No.
Like a teenage girl did it the day before and Rosa Parks saw what happened and then they went and recreated it.
Yeah.
With the media for clicks. Old-timey clicks.
Old-timey clicks.
Yeah.
Old-timey clickbait.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Exactly.
And so like Friedan was not attractive. She wrote The Feminine Mystique, which, so Simone de Beauvoir wrote these like very high level, like she was really smart. She's one of the few that I was reading her books going, wow, this lady was like really intelligent, horrible, very evil person, like literally like morally inverted a person, but very, very smart. Her stuff you can read and it's like very high level. Alice Bailey's stuff is horrible. It's the worst writing ever. It's just like bullet point lists. It's like a nightmare to read. I'm just like, I can't believe people read this on purpose. It's painful. But Friedan's book was like a very entry level, kind of dumbed down book that was very accessible for like housewives in the 60s. Everybody could read it. It was probably like an 8th grade reading level type of a book, which is why it got so popular and probably did so well. But she was not attractive and she was not like marketable, and Steinem was. And so they had this rivalry because Friedan would always be like, well, you know, I think that I'm better and I think that my ideas are better. And she thought that Steinem was too radical with the abortion stuff and things like that. And she just thought that a lot of women would end up being alienated from the women's movement, but that they were obviously propping up Steinem because she was kind of hot. And it's kind of true.
Well, she got a job undercover at Playboy, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep, she did. And they always send these people to India. So like, that's another thing you see over and over is sending everybody to India, whether it's Blavatsky, Bailey, Steinem spent a couple years there under the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And that's another thing, much like MK Ultra, that the CIA says, oh yeah, we shut it down, but they didn't. They didn't shut it down at all. They just rerouted funding through the Ford Foundation and kept the whole thing going. And we have Project Mockingbird and all that kind of stuff. So she was the face of feminism for the CIA for their culture creation stuff in the 70s. And she still kind of is. And like now she's married to Christian Bale's dad. Yeah. So she's Christian Bale's stepmom. She's got a lot of interesting connections that way. Steinem does.
So that's interesting point that you made, how they all send them to India, because Steinem had a background in theosophy.
Yep.
New Age.
Yeah. Her mom and grandmother were theosophists, which is another thing I never hear about her. So
no one can build a cult faster than an Indian, I feel like.
I know.
A guru, a yogi, a swami. They got this down pat, like how to get a giant following by talking in riddles. I'm thinking of like Bikram.
Yeah.
yoga and
Yoga.
those like Yogananda dudes and Osho,
Hmm. Yeah.
always about restricting your diet.
Yep.
And you had a really good Bible verse in your book, 1 Timothy 4:1, lying spirits, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats. So that's in the starter package of feminism.
It is. It's right in the feminist starter pack.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
It
And
is weird. And
they
why
always go to India and Tibet
yeah.
and come back with this Eastern mysticism stuff that ends up being New Age stuff.
And it's so annoying, like, because Buddhism, if you really look at like Buddha's life, he did not respect women. He held them in a very low esteem.
Yeah.
Like the Buddha. He like
Yes.
left his wife to go find enlightenment. And
Don't they? That's exactly what all the feminists in my book did.
yeah.
Left their husband and kids to go find enlightenment and spread feminism around the world. But the second book that I'm working on right now, I'm super excited about it because I'm covering like Russia and Eastern Europe and the Bolsheviks and their feminist revolution, and how a lot of these people, again, were involved in espionage. These are the things that always go together, right? It's espionage, the occult, and then social engineering stuff.
And
Always
stuff.
Yes, of course. Well, of
Yeah.
course, we have, like we said last time, it's always butt stuff for some reason. That's what they're into.
And sharing your women and don't eat meat and just sit there and meditate and don't think of anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Just clear your head out. Well, they had quests to Tibet and India and all that stuff too. They were doing the same stuff, right?
mhm.
But instead of it being Western liberalism, it was Bolshevik and Soviet communism.
And look what has swept through Western women's culture is yoga.
Yeah. Oh yes, I know.
Everybody does. I did yoga. You did. I'm sure you did yoga.
I didn't, but it's because I was into weightlifting and I was like,
okay.
I was too cool for yoga. I was like, nah, that's not hardcore. You can't put on metal and like max out a lift to yoga, which I still love to do. I have like a butch tomboy side to my personality, which is why I always feel like I'm such a weird person to be talking about this stuff in a way. Because in a lot of ways, you would think I would be like a feminist. I mean, I teach women how to shoot guns for self-defense. You would think I'd be like all about that stuff. But so I'm always like a weird contradiction of a bunch of different stuff that shouldn't go together, but somehow I am. Here we are. I don't know.
I think yoga appeals to women because it's a very passive form of exercise.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also has a reputation for like, right, the hot yoga teacher, the sexy yoga girl, and like, ooh, look how bendy she is. And look how flexible she is in the poses she can do. There's some of that too, where it's like, it has a reputation for like, it's what hot girls do, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it, because a lot of my friends that got into yoga and wanted me to get into yoga, it was more that kind of thing for them. But also, yeah, it was like all my friends went off to college. I was in this group of smart kids and we were all in like college prep programs together and like advanced placement stuff together. And I'm the only one that like, I got this kind of like you, where it was like early on, I kind of figured out like a lot of this stuff isn't what they say it is. And I was like, I hated school because I figured out really early that it was not a place for smart people. I knew that college was basically baloney and I wasn't going to do that. And it was really hard because everybody was like, what do you mean you're not going to college? What, like, you're insane. You have to. You've been doing this stuff since first grade to get into college early and you have like half the credits done. And I was like, no, I just couldn't foresee 4 years more of the indoctrination, basically, because it's like, they only care if you sit there and get your head counted while you're sitting in the seat. I know that you were homeschooled too, so you never had to deal with the cliques, but I was never in any clique. I was kind of in the smart kid clique, but I had like stoner friends and cowboy friends and like all these different groups that I was kind of friends with. And I just didn't like the whole school thing. And I could not even imagine 4 more years of like college. I just couldn't do it. But all my friends went and we all went to church together. growing up, we were all Christian together, and they came back from college atheists, every single one of them out of my friends group. They were all doing yoga, drinking a ton, sleeping around with a ton of boys, and they were all suddenly atheists, like Darwinist evolutionists and feminists. And I was already having my first baby when I was 20.
Mm.
So it was like my friend group kind of disappeared too because of that. So I've kind of had to like kind of be willing to do things on my own and not have a lot of approval, which I think is usually really hard for a lot of women. And I think that's the other way that we all get shuttled into this feminist stuff, is because like most girls don't want to be the one who isn't in the group or who isn't doing this. So like if all your friends are doing girl boss things, you want to do girl boss things. You don't want to be the only one who's like, no, I want to get married and have babies, if everyone else goes, ew. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this anti-natalist attitude that's so prevalent now, where it's like babies are gross, kids are annoying, getting pregnant ruins your body, it's just yucky. And that whole thing just, it makes me so sad because they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah. Have you heard that Ariana Grande song "God Is a Woman"?
Yes, I sure have.
So
Sure have.
that's pretty gross
She's
video.
all her videos are pretty gross. She's very occult symbolism stuff too.
Yeah.
She's got Kabbalah bracelets on all the
I
time.
was just gonna say, I have a Kabbalah book that is called "God Wears Lipstick" or something like that. So this is a very Kabbalist also theology that God is man and woman.
Yes, totally.
So we did talk about Wicca a little bit last time, just a little religion that was started in 1954, right? So when you're going back to your ancient pagan goddess ways, all the way back to the 50s.
All the way back to the 50s.
Student of Aleister Crowley, Gerald Gardner, he created this thing, and I guess you could say there's equality in it because it's the triple goddess and the horned god.
Yeah.
But it's all about like doing sky-clad rituals, which is nude.
Yes. He was a big nudist.
Yes.
Gardner was. He was super into that. I think his little group started mostly as like a nudist club first.
The more you study gurus and people who do this, cult leaders, it's just all about having harems. That's it.
It is.
And oh, here's a good one. The Satanic Temple, not the Satanic Church, but the Satanic Temple deems abobos as one of its religious sacraments.
Yes. In fact, they have a lawsuit in Texas. When Texas was the first one to put restrictions on again, they immediately filed a lawsuit saying that it was one of their religious sacraments, and therefore, because of freedom of religion, you can't tell them they can't do abobos.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, that's kind of one of the things that also black pilled me a little bit on our liberal democratic foundations. Not that everything about it is bad, but it's like, well, if you're going to have religious freedom, then like the other lady in there, Susanna Budapest, she was one of the first ones to win a lawsuit to be able to do witchcraft again in California, because she said, I'm sorry, I came all the way from the Czech Republic to live here and have religious freedom, and you're telling me I can't read tarot cards and tell fortunes and do witchcraft? What's my religion? And she actually, there was an act on the books in California that prohibited witchcraft at the time, and they got it removed because they made that argument. So,
well, what happens when the human sacrifice is part of your religion? Right.
Very good question. And well, this is something I've had people argue with me in debates, and I just saw it today on Twitter. Another, like, somebody had a Twitter space about the thing that just got overturned, and she was arguing like a pro-life argument, and she was asking the guy, she said, so what about when a 22-week baby is like born early and it's in the NICU, it's in the neonatal infant, care unit? Can mothers kill the baby then or no? because you want them to be able to have a bobos at 20 weeks. So why can't, like, what's the difference? And he ended up actually saying to her, yeah, I think that's fine. Now, legally, you might, I don't know if you could legally pass that, but morally, I think it's fine for mothers to do that. And we had that Ralph Northam in Virginia saying that when babies are born full term, if the parents and the doctor have a discussion and they, you know, say there's something wrong with it, or just say that it's not what the parents wanted, we'll keep the baby comfortable. Do you remember that clip of him saying, oh, he said, we'll keep the baby comfortable. It won't suffer. You know, we'll just make it very sleepy while the doctor and the parents have a discussion about what is to be done. And, you know, that's a decision that's between them. So he was basically saying, if you have a baby and it comes out with any issues or problems, or you just decide it wasn't the baby you wanted, it doesn't have the hair color you like, you wanted a boy and it's a girl, whatever, that you should be able to do infanticide, basically. This is being argued. Like, there are laws, there was a law proposed in New York, I want to say last year, that they were saying that up to a certain point after birth, that parents should be able to make this decision. Because the logical extension of the abobo argument leads to that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
and then that just made me think of in Canada, they just had this thing where if you are too depressed and you're too broke and you can't afford your life anymore, they will assist you with unaliving yourself.
Yes. Unaliving. Isn't that what
Yeah.
Teal Swan calls it too?
That's what the internet has deemed appropriate for not getting flagged
okay.
on like TikTok and YouTube and stuff. So
yeah. So yeah, it's like a giant DEATH cult, isn't
it's
it?
almost like they want us dead.
Yeah, it's
so
weird.
You mentioned this book that was written in 1930 called The World in 2030.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Lord
it
Birkenhead.
said, babies will be born from artificial wombs, they think.
Yes.
This is what they're projecting. And I found an old book by Arthur C. Clarke about the world in 2018 or 2017 or one of those years. And I read this personal ad that they wrote. This is what personal ads are going to be like. And it was like, how do you say it? How do you say it? That's so funny. Transformers.
Yes, Transformers.
Seeking,
I remember that.
Male or female, artificial orgasm is fine. It was just like all of the things that we are now.
Yeah.
In a little blurb, but they're so good at predicting what the world's going to be.
They are. Isn't that weird?
Right. And so they want the babies to be born from artificial wombs. That's in Brave New World. To what they say, to free up women to do the mundane tasks so men could do more important work. So
yes.
I'm like, oh, great. So
it was like a misogynist version of like,
oh, yeah.
But if you think about it, that's what it is. So this is another point I argue all the time in debates. If women's liberation is so great for women and it gave us all this freedom to be a girl boss, how come the top 20 careers that women hold are the same exact ones they held 100 years ago and are basically the same things that we used to do at home for, you know, without having to pay taxes? So it's, if you look it up now and you look it up in 1920, it's basically the same stuff. It's like secretary, waitress, nurse, teacher, daycare provider, like childcare type of things, accounting.
All the underpaid jobs, right?
Yes, and things that women did in the home for their family before women's lib, only we didn't have to pay all the taxes on it, right? Mm-hmm. Now you get to do those things for a paycheck and you have to pay taxes, and you're going to end up having to have debt because you're going to have to buy a house, you're going to have a car to get your job. It's like, if you take the cost of what it costs for women to have careers and then what they make, and then you take all the taxes out of it, it's like the financial gain for a family, if you have more than one or two kids, it just doesn't make any sense most of the time for women to work. So who benefits from it? Well, the corporations benefit, the governments benefit, The social engineers benefit. It's not families. If you look at like the poverty levels in this country now, the vast majority of poverty is in single mom families. So it's like, there's just not a very good argument when you look at all this. And at the last chapter of the book, I do get into that a bit, because I feel like for the people who aren't interested in the occult stuff, for the people who are going to go, well, that's just conspiracy stuff, or that's just, I don't believe in religion. It's like, okay, well, let's just look at the actual stats of how this has worked out for everybody. Women have higher rates of alcohol, depression, and substance abuse than they've ever had since we started recording it. We have lower rates of fertility. We have a birth rate collapse around the world in all but 2 countries, like a couple countries in Africa and India. And don't you worry, because the Rockefeller Foundation is right on top of that, and they are working on it right now as we speak. There's a white paper I mentioned in there where they have their whole plan to take care of that and make sure that Africa and India also have far below replacement birth rates as well. The family court systems, the number of children who are on ADHD meds, antidepressants, have autism, have any number of dysfunctional medical and mental health problems. There was a study they did of children who were admitted to psych wards, and they found out that like close to 90% of the kids in psych wards come from, broken homes and divorced families. If you look at divorce, 70% of divorces are initiated by the woman. If you look at college educated couples, that number goes up to 90%. So if you were a man and you wanted to get married, I would highly recommend maybe not getting a wife who has a college degree based on that statistic, because if there's a divorce.
That's such an interesting statistic.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of things with statistics. And I'm just thinking, okay, you said 70% of women initiate the divorce, right?
Yeah.
So today's modern man, if we're going to dissect feminism, I'm going to talk about men too.
Yes. And we should.
They are not stepping up as men.
No.
And they're not living as men, they're living as children, like Aleister Crowley's Aeon of Horus was created to do, was create man children.
Yes.
And a woman is not attracted to a child.
That's true.
The first thing that will kill intimacy or respect is acting like a baby if you're a man, right? And women are ending up having to do everything, and the man is just an accessory. So it's like you have these girls that are stepping up, they're crushing it, they're making the money, they're getting the education, they're getting the job, they're like getting the credit, they're doing everything that a man would do, right, to support a family. And the man is just there as kind of an accessory. She's planning the wedding, all he has to do is show up. She's planning the vacation, all he has to do, she's doing the childcare, she's doing it all. And so when she's fed up and he's not done anything, so she's the one that, I'm going to initiate this divorce because I'm already doing everything anyway. I'm already doing all the domestic labor, I'm doing the emotional labor, I'm also making money. And guys are like, I want to split it 50-50. So this is the big discourse in dating right now, is should it go 50-50? Right?
Yeah.
And
excuse me.
So I'm not seeing that women are doing this hypergamous thing like a red pill man would have you believe. I feel like she's taking the initiative, just like she's had to do in every other step of the way, to improve things in the way that she feels, or she's been told, or she's been deceived to believe that this is going to improve your life. Does that make sense?
Yes. And what happens is it becomes like this vicious cycle, right? Where it's like, if a man takes initiative and is like the kind of man that maybe you and I would think is like a good patriarch of the family, who's going to step up and be a leader, he's going to take care of things, he's going to solve problems. A lot of women now see that as you're being controlling. You are you're trying to dominate me. I feel like I need to prove that I can do that too. And it shouldn't just be your decision. And it's like, it's both things happening at the same time, where it's like we give men no incentive to be leaders or to act like men. We tell them everything they do that's masculine is toxic and bad and rapey and mean. And then we tell women, if you don't act like a boss bitch, you're going to be vulnerable. Men will take advantage of you. So you have to assert yourself, and you have to make your own money, and you have to prove you can do everything without a man. And then you can like have a man because you want him, not because you need him, because that's a sign of weakness. So it pits both against each other. And it motivates women to do all the things that are going to sabotage the marriage. And it motivates men to do all the things that are going to sabotage the marriage. And then they're both looking at each other going, we love each other. Why can't we get along? Why isn't this working? Why can't we make it work? Like, I see this a lot. I saw it with my parents. I saw it with my first relationship, with a lot of my friends. And it's like, everybody on both sides is being incentivized to do all the wrong things. And it's like, if you take away every incentive for men to act like men, they're going to act like babies and play video games and do whatever and be like, whatever, I guess I'll just watch sports ball and play video games then. And I'm just going to be defeated, and I'm just going to cross my arms and be like, whatever, women are just like stupid and mean, and I'm not going to try. And then the women are like, well, I'm just going to have to do everything myself then, because he's a Homer Simpson, he's a Ray Romano. Like, you have these caricatures since the 80s and 90s of all the men being bumbling fools who can't do anything, and the woman always has to like Lois Griffin and
Married with Children.
Yes, Married with Children, where it's like the man is useless and worthless anyway, and the woman has to like step in and take care of things, and she's the sensible one who has her head on straight. And it's like, we've just inverted everything. I feel like both roles have been inverted. We've infantilized men, and then we've told women they have to be the boss. And then we wonder why marriages don't work.
Mm-hmm.
It should be obvious, but it's not.
No,
you know?
Not just that, like, you put all of the responsibility on mom.
Yeah.
And all dad has to go like punch in somewhere for 8 hours and come home, and he doesn't contribute whatsoever. This is the common like complaints that I see over and over and over again, is like, men think that if they contribute financially, then that's it. And they don't have to do anything else, right? Like, I paid for all this. If you go to holidays, you'll see all the women scurrying, making everything nice, and the guys sitting back and relaxing. Well, we made the money. But now women can make money. So you're going to have to think of like other contributions other than financial to, I don't know, make this a partnership. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And I think usually, I think this is what happens too, is like, people can be okay with like, so when you're dating or you're just married, you don't have kids yet, he's making money, you're making money, and when you're not at work, you can have fun. You can like cook the dinners together, you can go out on the town, you can go on your vacations. It's like, it usually works out okay at that point. It's when kids get in the mix that becomes the issue, where it's like, now we have a division of labor issue. And it's like, well, who's going to stay home if one of the kids gets sick? Who's going to handle the emergencies when we get phone calls from school because somebody peed their pants or they threw up on themselves, like all the things that happen. Who's going to take Junior to baseball and Jane to gymnastics? And it's like this constant fight. And you end up always comparing, like, well, I did this and this and this, and you didn't even do blah. And then the guy goes, me, well, I did this and this, and you don't even care about, what I need. It just, it makes it to where, again, it's like you're competing with your spouse, and then you are like pitted against each other, and you're constantly like, both like I always hear from guys that it's like, she doesn't care about our sex life anymore, and she just is looking for ways to tear me down and tell me that I suck and I'm not good enough. And then the woman says exactly what you said, which is like, I feel like I'm doing everything anyway. I feel like he just, he's perfectly fine with coming home from work and kicking up his feet and relaxing. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, this has to get done and that has to get done. And how can he just sit there? And it's not that you're ever going to not have problems in marriages and relationships between men and women, but the current climate and the current situation, and now we have an added layer of insanity, which is like, is there even genders?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like
Gender roles.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting because in Orthodoxy, speaking of careers and things like that, running a household is a job,
Oh, for sure.
right? It's
Yes.
more than a full-time job. And in Orthodoxy, we're taught that motherhood is the most important occupation on earth,
Yes.
right? So she
Yes.
actually has the most important job there is by being a mother. And all other jobs, including men's career, that
Should
brings in all the
support
money
that.
and the accolades and the success and everything, all that exists just to support her and her needs and the baby's needs.
Yes.
So a lot of complaints I hear is that he doesn't appreciate the domestic labor. He doesn't appreciate anything that goes into running the house. He thinks it's easy. He thinks all I do is sit around
Yeah.
while the baby coos, and maybe I'll throw a load of laundry in once a week or whatever. He thinks just it's so easy, but it's not. It's like a serious, if you totaled up all of the jobs that are like fall to women,
Mm-hmm.
it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. A chef, a full-time nanny, a maid, a counselor, a friend, like a therapist,
Yeah.
like all of these things that women do is worth at least $500,000 a year, if not more. I mean, it's a priceless job, but if
It
you were
is.
to like itemize how much people make doing these jobs, it's a lot.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure. I mean, and I think one of the things that affects that perception is that we used to have larger families. Now there's maybe one or two kids for most families, one or two for most. So like me having five, Andy had to witness me give birth multiple times. He would sit there and watch me with nursing a baby. Like like when you're nursing, you're stuck. Like that's your job for
Mhm.
a year and a half. Like everything else, it takes second place, and you are nursing first and foremost, and you drop everything to do that. So there was a point where after baby number 5, I'm nursing. And I was just thinking about this yesterday. My friend had a baby the same time I had my 5th baby. And she went through something horrible, which her husband was dying from cancer at the time that their baby was born. And the baby was not taking formula. She wasn't able to nurse because she was at, the hospital with him all the time. Just a horrible situation she was going through. And she was like, I don't know what to do because I can't nurse. And the formula is like not going well at all. Like the baby's not tolerating it at all. So I started pumping extra, freezing it, and shipping it to her every week. So I was like nursing on one side and pumping on the other. And this was like my full-time job. And I had a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And Andy saw me just like falling asleep doing all this. Like I'm just sitting there like falling asleep with the baby and the thing, and the kids are running around. And he was just like, okay, I'll just like work 2 jobs because
Yeah.
he just was like, I don't know how you're even doing it. It's insane. And like, I have to help you. And I think it just was like him watching me try to handle all these things made him really want to like work harder to help support all the things I was trying to do. Cause he was looking at it going, she's doing really important. Like she's raising the kids and she's feeding the kids and feeding someone else's kid. And the least I can do is like work my butt off and do everything I can to help. And I think when you just have like a college educated couple with one child, nobody does appreciate anything domestic. And motherhood has now become this thing that we look at and we go, you can do it on nights and weekends after your job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been so devalued. And like we were talking, I think a lot of it has to do with getting rid of Mary and not acknowledging the Theotokos at all, not venerating motherhood at all, seeing it as something that only like women who aren't smart enough to hack it in a career do. They just pop out babies, like this
Exactly.
attitude, you know,
Yeah.
that domestic work is not valued, it's not venerated, it's not held in any sort of esteem. It's basically for losers. So I don't think men respect it or value it or want to support it. And I don't think women aspire to do it and do a really good job at it. And I feel like now that my oldest two are adults, I'm like, now I'm finally to the point where the really hard, like sleepless night baby stuff is behind me. And I'm starting to see like the fruits of all those years of like, where you're just grinding and grinding with all the kids and the busy life. And I'm like, I'm a matriarch. Like, I'm going to have all these grandkids. Like, imagine if my kids each just have 3. I have 15 grandkids. Like, dang, like that makes me feel wealthy. It makes me feel accomplished. It makes me feel like I've really done something. I've left a legacy.
Mhm.
Whereas what if I had just gotten a corporate career? When I die, they're going to go, oh, gee, she was a really great, vice president of megacorp, fill her job tomorrow, and no one's going to care.
Mhm.
So I think that we've gone about this all wrong. I think we should restore motherhood. I would love it if America, since Protestantism is dying anyway, and so many people are turning to Orthodoxy because they're looking for something real and substantive and more traditional and filled with truth. And as you know, Jesus is at the bottom of every rabbit hole. If you go deep enough, that's where you will find him. So I think if we had an Orthodox America where we venerated motherhood and the Theotokos and femininity and family and marriage, and those things were cool again, well, everything would be different. But right now, we take all that stuff and we say it's stupid and it sucks and it's gross. And why would you ever want to do that? Just play video games and smoke weed and start an OnlyFans. Like,
Yeah.
so it's a
So-
very vicious cycle that feeds on itself, I guess is what all I was trying to say.
So wrapping it up, this was such a good talk. I really liked it. And before you guys call me a pick-me trader uh, to women, I'm none of those things because I mean, misogyny is real. That's a real thing. The devil hates women, and he's going to convince
That is true.
to hate women because she gave birth to the Redeemer of mankind.
Exactly.
So, I've worked in social services and I've seen women have disadvantages in life just because they are physically weaker.
Yes.
I've seen them ground down. I've seen them beaten. I've seen their kids go into foster care. I've seen all of it, so I'm not blind to the plight of women.
I should mention too that I am also not, and there's a reason why I teach self-defense and shooting to women.
Yeah.
And it's because I've been in that situation myself. And I'm the kind of person that never thought that would ever happen to me, right? I was never like shy or easily influenced or I might have been more easily manipulated than I thought, because I think I still kind of thought that most people were pretty honest and like trustworthy for the most part. I didn't realize like the stuff that you've talked about a lot, the con man mentality and the like psychological manipulation stuff, that's what got me. And I found myself in a very dangerous, very bad situation at one point when I was young. And the only thing that stopped that was me getting a gun. I had a restraining order. That did not work. I called the police multiple times. They would show up 2 hours, 4 hours too late and just take pictures of me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why all my girls learn to shoot. That's why I teach women how to shoot. And you're right, there is abuse and there's bad people, and men are certainly not the exception, and women are not to blame for all the evils of the world.
I'm thinking there's like layers of protection that the enemy has to get through. He wants the children.
Yes.
The most, but you have to get through the men.
Yes.
Which has been blasted through. Then you have to get through the women.
Yep.
To get to the kids. And I think that's what the layer of like feminism and stuff is like, when the man protection has been, the umbrella is off. Now you have to act like a man.
Yes.
to get things done. And so we've
Wow,
answered.
you nailed it with that. Like we could have skipped half of what we just said and you could have just said that because that just really nailed it. Yeah.
So yeah, we answered the question, what is a feminist? A bunch of creepy weirdos. Now we're kind of talking about what makes a feminist. So that's a little nuanced difference, because I don't think that women who have healthy men in their life are as susceptible to this ideology.
Totally agree.
Because it's obviously crazy.
Yes.
But if you spend enough time around a lot of men, you will start to think this way.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we need to be hanging around lots of single guys. I think we need to mostly, I'm not weird, but like, you know, keep it in your family. Like you don't need a lot of guy friends.
Right.
As a single girl. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you hang out with guys and you try to be a cool girl, you're going to learn a lot of things that are going to turn you off about guys, things that locker room talk. You don't want to hear that. Right?
No.
Disrespect of women. You're going to start to be like, you know, I think these feminists are onto something because these guys are a bunch of baby losers.
Yeah.
Right?
You know what's another thing I wanted to say earlier that I forgot? You've said, like, you've talked about how some of these crazy Protestant backgrounds produce these women because of the abuse. I was thinking about it, and I think the last 3 women I've debated who were like staunch feminists, one of whom was a witch. And she said that she became a witch because she grew up in a very, like, one of those ultra fundamentalist Southern Baptist type of sects where there was the kind of abuse that you would imagine going on. And I thought, I think the last 3 women I've debated all had that background, like a very fundamentalist Protestant kind of crazy background that led to the type of abuses that drove them to be like feminists or witches or something that they felt like, I need power, I need to protect myself.
Yes.
So that's, I think you're definitely right about that being one of the factors.
If you
and then the other thing is all the women I debate so far have divorced parents and a dad that they say was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my dad was terrible and it was better for us when he left, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the case.
Yeah.
Right? To have him gone is a relief.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was thinking like it was either Annie Besant or the other one that her husband beat her so bad that she had to flee him. Which, what's the other theosophy, Daryl? Not Blavatsky.
Bailey.
I think it was Annie Besant. So her
probably
story was that she had a very fundamental Christian husband and he just like beat her to within an inch of her life.
Oh yeah, I think so, because she took one of the kids to India or something. Didn't she have kids?
Yeah.
There was something where she said that he was like really, really, really abusive.
So,
and that's the other thing too that I was thinking about is like in the churches I grew up in and sometimes in the Catholic Church, it's just no divorce. And this is another big argument people make for feminism, which is like, well, but you're just going to tell abused women they have to stay. And the Orthodox Church, when I went through catechism, I was surprised to learn that they have like criteria, they have economia, they have exceptions where they go, well, no, if the priest sees the abuse or really bad substance abuse or really bad like prelest or possession or things like of that nature or abandonment, or there's like 8 different criteria. And then my priest said there's even sometimes other things where if the priest feels like the marriage itself is detrimental to one or both people's salvation, that they will actually like, you know, give a blessing to end the marriage. And I think I put in the book that a long time ago, it was a common practice to have both people agree to become monastics in order to get the divorce quite often. So, I mean, that is another thing that Protestants came up with. And I think Catholics as well to some extent, because there's not a lot of Catholic divorce either. It's like this stay if it kills you stuff. We're not talking about that, guys. Like Jamie and I are not like, nope, you gotta be able to take a few punches, you know, and just ride it out.
Order it out.
No.
That's the interesting thing, because like every time I've ever brought issues to my priest, who's a man, I've never been told like, just pray or just submit or just be
Yeah.
sweet or just, like
Yeah.
they were always very understanding on my side, saying this is, legitimate, and listen to me, counsel me. And you're right, they will allow you to leave abusive relationships. We were taught like the 4 A's. It was like you said, abandonment, adultery, abuse, and
Yeah.
the other A I can't remember. But yeah, like the church does not want any woman to just take it. I mean, there are saints, Saint Xenia, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I know I've read of a couple that left like bad men.
but even what was her name? Maybe it was Xenia. Anyways, she died because of her spousal abuse.
Oh.
But no one's ever like put her in front of me, and not that I had that much of a problem, but no one's ever
Right.
said like, just look at her, pray to her, and take it.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
No, so like that's something I try to bring up when in these debates, women will be like, but we have to have feminism and we have to have no fault divorce because the church will just tell women they have to sit there and take it. And I'm like, well, not mine, like not my church. Maybe some of these crazy fundamentalist Baptists and maybe some of the crazy like Mormons at like the who was that, Warren Jeffs type of churches or things like that. Yeah, they will, but that's because they are false churches. And it's very difficult as Americans for us to like, because people don't know about orthodoxy, so they think everything is like crazy Baptists or Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit hard sometimes to break through that barrier and explain it doesn't have to be that way, and that's not really what Christianity is.
Exactly. And there's a phrase going around the internet. She's fatherless. She acts fatherless.
Oh.
So this is like a woman who has the qualities of feminism and stuff like that because she didn't have a father. But
Like daddy issues.
Yes, daddy issues.
Yeah.
But it's so bizarre to me that you're going to punish a girl further because she did not have good male role models. So therefore, she's only good to be taken advantage of or cast away.
Yeah. Right? So Andrew had a girl on his stream who was a sex worker yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, how did you get into this stuff? And because she advocates for it. And he was like, well, how did you get into this? And she had a terrible childhood. Not a good situation with dad or stepdad at all. Some pretty bad stuff going on. And she felt like she was pushed into it. And Andy's like, okay, well, given all of that, why do you want that for other people? Like, why are you telling other young girls to do it? And like, I think by the end of it, he had really gotten through to her, but like people were very surprised he was so like understanding and patient with her. And it's because he's like, look, I don't want to just be like, ha ha, you stupid thought, you deserve it. And then he's like, no, I have daughters. Like, we shouldn't want this for anyone. Like, even, and they always go through something to get like that. Like, so this girl did have like a massive attitude. She had some had some crazy stuff going on, but Andy was just like, he's seen this kind of thing enough that he's like, well, I'm like almost certain what probably went on to get her to this point, so it's like there's ways to talk to people that are much more effective than just calling them names. And
what I've noticed, when girls get an attitude when they're teenagers is because they're being sexualized.
A lot of times, yes, they get like super rebellious. And
you had a sweet girl and like all of a sudden she catches an attitude, it's because someone has been inappropriate to her or she's gone too far with a boy, and now she's got this
attitude. And I think the other thing that happens with the attitude too that I've seen, because watching my kids grow up and their friends, because I've seen some of those girls where they go from being super sweet like 10-year-old girls to being like crazy rebellious like 14, 15-year-olds, is like the parents in their life, the adults in their life, are acting incompetent and doing things they should not be doing.
Yes.
And so the kid is like, well, what makes you the boss? You don't know what you're doing. Look how you're acting. You're like lying. You're doing stuff you shouldn't be doing. You're telling me not to do it, and then you're turning around and doing it. Why do you get to be the boss? And they just have no respect because the adults in their life are acting like that.
That's so true. Teenagers can smell BS just like that, and
Yeah.
they're not going to like
Yeah.
down with you having any authority over them when they view you as incompetent. That's true.
Yeah.
So maybe just like in the last 5 minutes, let's kind of like brainstorm a little bit. Like, look, what's the antidote to feminist anger? Because I think good men and being around good men is the primary defense against feminism.
Yeah.
Because if you have a good dad and you have good brothers and you have a good spouse, you're not going to like get sucked into this. You're going to say, no, that's a little bit crazy because,
Yeah.
you know, I have examples of goodness in men. And it's so crazy that it's almost the most anti-romantic sentiments. And women are so romantic in their beings that what am I trying to say? To turn a woman off of men and off of love, it's got to take a lot of abuse and grinding down. It's not just a switch that flips when you go to college, like a liberal college, you know? So are romantic relationships kind of an antidote to feminism, do you think, a little bit?
Well, this is something I've thought about a ton
Uh-huh.
since starting to write and talk about these things in the last couple of years. And it's very hard now because most kids, this is another thing that me having kids, I think helps me understand pretty well, is that most kids don't get the majority of their impressions about life in the world just from the people around them because families are so atomized. So like my kids' friends don't hang out with their parents ever. And they think it's super weird that my kids want to always like hang out with me and Andy. Like our kids love like family game night, hanging out with mom and dad, watching movies or shows. We swim in the pool, we go to the beach. Like we do stuff together all the time because we think it's fun. And their friends think that's super bizarre and weird. And they're like, no, my parents will be in their room, like scrolling on their phones, and we'll be in our room scrolling on our phones. We don't hang out. That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
So most of what they learn and perceive about the world comes from school and their phone. And what do they see on their phone? They see, I mean, the culture is so against us at this point that my worry is that things are going to have to get really bad before they get better, but I hope that that's wrong. And I do have hope. And that's why I wrote the book. And that's why I encourage women to be moms and get married and all those things. But it's really tough when you have every popular female on planet Earth right now, Beyonce, Ariana Grande, Cardi B, every actress, right? Every popular actress, they're all very feminist. They're all hypersexualized. They're all boss bitch girl power, the Kardashians, you know, like all these people. And then you see Instagram influencers and OnlyFans girls, and it's like there's not a lot of role models out there at all that make any of the stuff you and I are talking about cool. That's one thing. And then all of that kind of stuff really encourages men to either just be simps, where they're just like buying Belle Delphine's bathwater, or they're like ballers and rappers, and you know, like they're the kind of guys who do treat women like this and just want them to twerk on them and this, and it's like the culture is so
Alpha bros.
Yeah, it's so tough right now where it's like the girls think they have, and this is the other thing that bothers me so much, is that girls now think they have to be into the most violent, kinkiest, weirdest sex stuff to be cool.
Yeah.
This is like yeah, I'll do this awful thing and this crazy outlandish thing. Heck yeah, I'm into that stuff. Like, I think that stuff's awesome. I want that stuff done to me. It's like a flex. It's like a cool thing. So given all of that that's going on, it's really rough to like even find that romantic soft side that we know is in girls. You and I know that's in there, and you see it in them when they're small. You
Mhm.
still see that in little girls, but it's like what I'm seeing with my kids' friends and stuff is like by the time they hit right around 11, 12, it starts to change. They're suddenly like watching Transformers put on makeup on YouTube, right? And they get like the 50,000 eyeshadow palettes and they're learning how to do drag makeup on themselves, and they're listening to this kind of music and watching these kind of videos and trying to emulate that behavior because it's cool. And it's been a problem for my kids who are homeschooled who are like, I don't like that and I'm not into that and I don't want to do it. Like it's weird when their friends come over, they don't know like what to do sometimes. So I'll be like, get in the pool, or like I'll try to find things for them to do that are fun that don't have anything to do with that. But it's really hard, and I see it and I'm like, this does worry me. But maybe if we could, I'm trying to figure out how we can kind of make motherhood and like respectable femininity like the cool thing again, which is going to be kind of tough to do.
Queen
But
energy.
yeah,
Like, because you are royalty when you are baptized in the church.
yeah,
And when you get married, you get crowned and you are like a king and queen of your own house. Um, but I feel like girls who are sincere and they do want to be a wife and mother are in danger almost because, like you said, the culture is so degraded right now.
yeah, that the kind of guys who find them are not.
Yes. If they don't also have a little bit of smarts, street smarts, and know what red flags are and stuff like that, then they can get their heart ripped out very easily,
Oh yeah,
and
that's
get taken
basically what
advantage
happened
of.
to me. You know,
Yeah.
it's basically what happened to me. And I thought I did. I didn't, because I was raised in rural middle of nowhere. So I was pretty naive, but I thought that I was like pretty savvy and pretty smart and nobody's fool. And I didn't think I was falling for it. So it's like, um, yeah, it's a tough thing. I don't know, like, do you restore the men first? Do you restore the women first? Do you try to
I
restore them
feel like that's
together?
the block. Like, I feel like that's the foundation block because, when you're walking down the street, men aren't like calling out, "Hey, baby, want a family?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not saying, "I'll take our kids to church." No, they're not saying that. They're being gross. So it's like you almost have to gravitate towards the church and like have most of your social activities revolve around that,
Yeah.
and the dating and the
Yeah.
socializing, hanging out, especially when you're like teen,
Yeah.
16 to 22. Um,
I totally agree with
if
that.
I was back at that stage, I would like just completely cut out dating and I would just hang out at church and see who comes to get me at coffee
Yeah.
hour, you know?
Well, here's one white pill out of all this stuff, you guys, especially for the ladies. Because of the nature of the stuff I talk about in this book, I get more messages from guys, especially Orthodox Christian or traditional Christian men in general. Some of them are Catholic, some of them are Protestant, a lot of ortho bros who really honestly want families. They want to be dads. They want to be dads so bad. And they're terrified too. Like they're
Mhm.
just as scared as women are because they're like, this is what they always ask me. And I'm like, you might as well ask me where you can find a unicorn. But they're like, how do I find a woman that wants to get married and stay home and raise our kids and won't like leave me and take my kids and half my stuff because the neighbor guy like is hotter or makes more money or makes her feel alive or something? And it's such a tough question. And then women will ask me the same thing. And I'm like, how can we get y'all together? And we've tried like some dating groups and stuff, and it's just been really tough. And what we have seen, I'll just be honest, we've started a couple of different, like a Discord dating group and then a Telegram dating group in the last year, and it's about 80% guys.
Okay.
So we can't
So-
get the women to show up. And I don't know if that's because they've already tried things like Tinder and they're just like not going to even try it. I don't know if they're nervous or scared. I haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet because they don't like to give a lot of feedback. It's usually something very generic, but I do know there's men out there in the church. They are looking for wives. And now here's the thing. Both sides have to temper their expectations, right? Because you're not going to find your trad wife dream girl who is going to already be perfect and submissive and does everything the way you want. Like, no, that doesn't exist for anyone, anywhere, ever. And it's the same. It's the same thing with guys too.
Yeah.
They're not going to all look like Brad Pitt. They're not going to have a six pack. They're not going to make like a ton of money maybe. And they're not going to maybe be like some super charismatic prince who's going to sweep you off your feet. So both sides have to be a little realistic. Andy and I have trained each other to be good spouses. We were terrible when we got together. We were terrible. I was a terrible wife. He was a terrible husband. Like now that we have 15 years to look back on, I'm like, oh my gosh, how could you like stand me? I was so snotty, and like there was just a lot of things about me that 15 years later I look back and I kind of like give myself the creeps just a little bit. And him too. He's like, no, he's like, I'm a loser. I played way too many video games. Why did you let me play video games for like 6 hours a day? We were normie retards. We were normie jerks when we got together.
Yeah.
And we just really wanted, like, he wanted a family. I wanted a family. We really, really wanted to make it work. And we were both Christian. And so we just like really pushed each other to continuously get better. And we decided we were going to try to improve as human beings together.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't find a perfect spouse. You have to find someone that the base is there. You know, they have the same beliefs as you and they have a good heart and they're willing to work on it with you. And you train each other how you want to be treated, you know?
I feel like if you're looking for a wife or a girlfriend, like, don't lead with, I want a submissive. It sounds weird to me.
It does.
It sounds like almost like BDSM or something. Like,
it does.
I'm a dom looking for a sub. It's just like.
It does. Yeah. So don't say that.
I want a partner. Okay. I don't like want a daddy.
Yeah. No, I don't either. That's
right.
And that's one of the only things that will kind of really set off my temper sometimes is if I feel like my husband is acting like my dad and like finger wagging at me or something. It's like, so I still have a little bit of that too, guys. It's not like people get a certain impression of me, I think. And it's like, no, I'm a real human being too. We're all real human beings. And so, yeah.
Well, you are a real smart and wise human being, and we could talk about this all night,
I know,
but we're gonna have to close it here. And I love this show so much, and thank you so much for coming on 2 times.
Thank you so much for having me on 2 times. It's my honor and privilege to be here and talk with you.
And tell us where we can get your book at.
It's on Amazon, but if you guys can find me on any of my social medias, if you go to my Twitter, it has my link tree there, but I think it's on most of my social medias. The Twitter is @Rach, the number 4, patriarchy. And it's got my email in the link tree, and you can email me or shoot me a DM if you do want a signed copy from me. Otherwise, Amazon is the place that you can get the book.
And Rachel will be with us at our event in Nashville on July 30th. So I hope you guys all come out. I'm working on a talk that's going to go from the beginning of time to the end of time. And
is that all?
Yeah, that's it. Just that one little sliver right there. And Jay's got some really funny comedy skits in the works, and it's going to be all fun and friends. And I've been drinking my chocolate, which is delicious, and it gives me that pep and helps my neurons to fire when we're doing these shows. And you can get your own. It's J50 is the promo code, and J53 Life for recurring if you want to keep your order going. But I love chocolate, and I love Rachel. And thank you so much
Jamie,
for coming.
Thank you.
Good night.